Village of Austin Planning Board and Architectural Review Board. We have a couple of circumstances I want to give everybody a heads up on. First off is we do not have a quorum here yet. We expect a quorum soon. I'm going to try to at least begin the agenda, hoping that our fourth member comes soon. Logistically, an application to be voted on either affirmatively or as a denial requires a quorum vote. So if you are expecting a vote tonight perhaps, and intuitively you sense that you may not have a quorum tonight on the vote, you can defer until we have at least 4 or more at another meeting. I don't know that we're going to have that circumstance tonight. We also have a double header here for the planning board. We have a work session after the regularly scheduled meeting tonight. So in an effort to move things along, originally it appeared to be a fairly brisk agenda, but we will try to move this thing along, and hopefully you will assist us in moving it along. We'll be responsible and sensitive, but we'd like to do it efficiently tonight. So we'll begin with the roll call.
Joseph Clark, absent today. John Fry.
Here.
Michael Beldotti is not here yet.
Ah,
Well, there we go.
item Q.
Yay!
You're in the last minute.
Watching on Q.
Walter Loveland is absent. Reginald Bush is absent tonight. Barbara Kwiatkowski.
Here.
Dr. Pawanaraya.
Yes.
And from staff, we have Mark Malone, Corporation Counsel, our outside consultant, Joseph Termelli from Keller Sessions, and myself, Linda Crosby.
So those of you expecting to see Joe Clark sitting here in the chairman's seat tonight, I'm standing in once again. And I'll do my best to do Joe Clark proud. So, beginning with the BAR, agenda items, BAR 11-17, ITC Holdings, 129-133 Main Street.
Come right up there.
Sure,
Yeah.
whichever way you want. Do you hear the BAR separately from the planning board?
We do. Now, is this a BAR and,
It's a dual.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you're,
We will have it.
so we will, shall we defer this and hear them both?
Typically what you do.
Yep.
Right,
So that's what we'll do. Thank you for the heads up.
I just wanted to, okay.
Moving right along, VAR 12-17, 49 Spring Street. 49 Spring Street.
That's also a dual header.
I'm sorry. So moving on into the planning board agenda, we will recircle back to 11-17 and do it as a joint review.
Yes? Back?
Yeah, we're back. We're moving along. We're cooperating.
All right, that'll work. I am gonna bring one with. Everything else will go digital? Is that?
Yep, we can pull up your file. And you can point to anything you want. I'll give you the mouse, and you can
Just scroll? Yeah, okay.
go through your file.
I have to apologize. Most boards that I go to aren't so high tech, so I think it's wonderful.
And just speak into the mic, so we can capture on camera.
Good evening. My name is, good evening. I'm Stephanie Fox. I'm the architect for 129-133 Main Street. The project before you is a pretty basic one. I'm assuming that you all are relatively familiar with the building, it being one of the main focal points of Main Street. Here is rim plumbing on the first floor, and above existing is what used to be used primarily as storage space. And the bay that we're talking about converting into, the only project the project before you was converting the second floor of this bay here, which is really right behind this tree here, into 2 studio apartments. we'll get into the plans in a little bit, but sometimes it's just easier to see with the pictures. On the facade, you can see that there's 3 entrances that are visible. This is the main entrance here to Rim Plumbing to the retail space. Here, this is an existing door to an existing stairway that leads to the 2nd floor and the 3rd floor of these spaces up here. Oops, sorry, I'm a little wacky. To these spaces, to the upper spaces up here. And that is also what we'll be using to access the 2nd floor apartments. And then here is another, it's a secondary exit that's not actually used for the retail space, but it's just required for code. This is the rear of the building. And again, the area that we're talking about converting is just this bay right in here. We were before the HPC last month, and we received approval. Part of that approval basically was approving the change of the front door to match. It's the same that was there. And originally we had talked about closing up this center bay and bricking it up. But what we all conceded to was that we're just going to replace the existing openings with 3 double hung windows that are going to match the front. And then we'll just put a false panel behind so that the facade can stay as it is, that we're not going to change the facade, we're not going to change the character of the facade. And then we're going to do at least impact as possible to the facade. You can see in the lot that there's an existing loading dock, and this is the garage door. You can see parking haphazardly for a couple of cars. Across the, I'll get this up. This is the door, again, that I was speaking about on the front elevation that leads to the stairwell to the 2nd floor, which will access those apartments. This is sort of a site plan. So here we have main entrance to Rim Plumbing, apartment entrance, and secondary retail entrance. In terms of apartment layout, really very little needs to be done. That space was already the space is already existing. It was being used for storage, one big, large, open space. The front elevation does not need to change. The windows are large. They're very nice. We're just going to be separating it out into 2 apartment spaces. As I said, we only met with the HPC like last week, so these plans reflect the same, but this will no longer be blocked up. It'll be a window with a false panel, but the layout will, remain the same. We meet the requirements for the studio size apartment of the 450 habitable feet, square feet per apartment. As you can see, front elevation really remained basically unchanged except for updating that door to the stairwell. And as I mentioned, I just brought the updated, this is the old elevation showing it bricked up. The only difference would be here that we're just going to do the window with a false panel behind. So obviously we're here before you because we need conditional use approval, which is an allowable use. There's various criteria required in the code for that, which we meet. That the residential units can only be permitted above a non-residential use, we meet that. The dwelling units must have its main entrance to the outside separate from any entrance for the non-residential uses. As you can see, we have that. We meet the floor area, habitable floor area for the dwelling units. 450 is required. We're providing 526 for apartment A and 537 for apartment B. Also, we're requesting the parking waiver. I don't know if that's part of the conditional use or if that's something sort of separate. As I mentioned, we do have 3 areas to park, but those primarily need to be allocated during the day, for the retail space, especially with the loading dock and things like that. Should you see it necessary, we can certainly somehow create some signage or something like that and allow the tenants to use that space during off hours, but we can't solely allocate it just to those spaces, but just to the tenant space. So, you know, we could, like I said, somehow we could work it out, but we just can't dedicate it to that.
To
So-
sum that notion up, there is an opportunity for some parking.
Some parking, but,
Some, and it may be on an unscheduled basis, although there's a pattern that can be found for parking use, probably, that suits the commercial business at times and suits the residential business.
right, say like, I mean.
Off business.
Off business after 8 PM or, and Sundays or something like that, or after 9 PM and Sundays or something like that. You know, just throwing something out there, you know. But again, we can't purely allocate it just for the new apartments, so that's why, you know, we have to ask for the waiver. And in terms of, just in terms of the waiver, we also meet all of those requirements as well. The changes from one permitted use or conditional use to another. We are not increasing the footprint of the building whatsoever. We do not, obviously, the proposal does not result in the loss of any off-street parking because there's no increase in footprint. And whatever access there is, we're gonna try and provide as much as we can.
What's on the third floor?
It's used as storage space, but
By whom?
room plumbing.
Okay.
So circling back to the parking, you might have a circumstance arise where you might have one of the residents maybe work from home. Then that car would be there during the day. I mean, have you given that some thought at all, or?
Well, they can have. I mean, I think that's, it would just be that, you know, they can, we could put up signage that says tenant parking only from 9 PM to 6 AM or something like that.
So then if you rent the apartment, you can have conditions on it that, you know, if it's someone that needs to leave a car there during the day, because maybe hop on the train or work in the city, that's gonna pretty much knock them out as an applicant, or somebody that work from home, is that what you're kinda saying?
Correct.
Or they could apply for a permit for the permanent one.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge with that is that we, as a board, have been kind of dealing with this for years, and it's sort of like the same parking permit's been sold, you know, 20 times over downtown, so that's always a little bit of pushback from some of the community, so something to think about.
And we're only talking about 2 units.
Have you looked at the rear parking area? Is there any way to strike that where you can maybe organize it a little bit better so it's not so,
It's hard
Random.
because where you're looking,
I don't think you'll gain much, if
Well, if you
anything,
take a
but.
look at the survey, actually,
yeah,
across the street here, well, it's not shown on the survey, is the firehouse,
Mhm.
right? And believe it or not, the firehouse actually uses a good portion of this lot to exit their facility. And Rich and this building.
yeah, like, and plus we have, there's dual, use, like, cause there's some use here, there's some, loading dock use this way and this way. So we have to be careful because you have the emergency exit of the fire company there.
Mhm.
So, I mean, if, we could stripe anything, but finding the way to use it would just be the temporary use or the conditional use of the time slot. So we could placard it, if you wanted it striped, we can. I don't
But I
know.
also don't think that you would want to impede the ability of the firehouse to get out,
No.
you know?
No, and I think-
Even though it's not really fair for him that the firehouse uses it, that's actually the practical implication, you know? And, you know, for them to not be able to pull their truck out, I mean, it's just kind of been that way forever.
I think the notion, I mean, Mark, you could speak further to the mechanics of the parking application. Is that technically a separate application under the conditional use?
I think the waiver is a separate application. You grant or not grant the conditional use, and then the waiver would flow from there. You would take that application as a separate application.
But you certainly recognized and spoken to all the elements of the waiver conditions. And it is problematic, and we've struggled with it for years, but I think one of the underlying notions that supports the waiver concept is existing volumetric space downtown, right? That space had use at some point. I'm not sure if you could speak to historically what the use may have been,
It
but.
was probably the same as it is today.
Yeah, so, but it's not to penalize a space downtown by requiring them to create parking where there was never parking. Anyone else here? Anyone here to speak to the application in the audience?
I make a motion, You ready?
Ready?
If you're gonna make a motion, could you just include the conditions that HPC stipulated? Do you want me to read
We
them?
will add that
Do you want me
to,
to add them, do you want me to read them to you?
yes.
Yes.
Okay, so there were 3. This is their draft minutes, so assuming that they approve them as is, they, just as Stephanie said, they asked for proposed windows to be weather shielded, double hung, 2/2 with true divided lights, and 7/8 mutton profile with a black finish and clear glass. The existing historic brick molding is to remain in situ. The center window will be a real window with blocked interior. The proposed doors is gelled when 5201 Hemlock solid wood. All construction shall comply with all requirements of the building department and the other department, agency, or board having jurisdiction. And this decision is set forth in the HPC's October 2nd minutes. So you have to vote upon.
And we conceded at the HPC meeting that those requirements would be posted on the construction documents in a box for submission.
Considering those added amendments to the Barbara's motion, do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's site plan
And
BAR.
And BAR.
combined.
So
And the
we'll
waiver.
put waiver.
Well, we'll make it, should we make a separate motion for the BAR? But I figure, I'm guessing
Yes.
that the amendments that Lynn highlighted speak to the BAR issues. But, so let's, for procedural consistency,
So
Do
this
we
was
have a
for the
motion?
parking waiver and for the site plan for
Yeah.
conditional use? Okay.
I'll make a motion on the BAR application with the
Second, okay.
HPC notes added to it.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
49 Spring Street Court. 49 Spring Street.
Question, is this an empty lot now? Is this
Yes.
an empty lot now?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Jimmy Hernandez, the architect for the project. This is, this is an empty lot now, it's 4,300 square feet for 4,308. It's in the DC zone, it's on Spring Street, right by St. Paul's and Waller. Yeah. I thought you had the, you were going to the zone information. That's, okay. I know that. Alright, so like I said before, this is currently an empty lot, and we're proposing to put a 4-story building. And we're proposing 2 retail stores at the the first floor, and then we will have 9 one-bedroom apartments and 3 two-bedroom apartments. The architecture, we're going to go along with the same as 47 Spring Street. The floor plan is very simple. We have the 2 retail stores, and then we have 3-in-1 design, 3 one-bedrooms, 1 two-bedroom that will repeat itself as you go up in 3 floors. And as per the architectural, again, we maintaining it within the same character as the next door. We have brick, and down at the bottom, we're going to try to maintain the facade the same as 47 Spring Street. And then we are looking to do stucco, and we have some architectural decorations on the top. As per, we had a comment from Lawrence Sessions, and we will be back. We are going to reverse our plan to reflect the 25-foot setback for the Croton Aqueduct. And also,
I'm sorry, repeat that, JB?
there is this is the Croton Aqueduct, so, there is a 25-foot setback. I wasn't sure if this is if we were gonna go over the setback, is this, the board to decide it, but I think further research demonstrated that we do need to go with the 25-foot setback in front of the Croton Aqueduct in order for the planning board to proceed. We also have, we require a total of 24 parking spaces. There's no parking on site. That will lead us into the zoning board of appeal. We did point out before in our drawing that we are within the proximity of 2 public parking areas. But since this is a new building, this will be, we will have to take this with the zoning board. If this was an existing building, I believe it's the planning board discretion to give us the waiver. But since this is a new building, we do have to go in front of the zoning board.
So the site plan is going to change the condition. But is this, if you scroll back over to the elevation,
Yeah.
is your sense that,
Elevation is not gonna,
so I think clearly what's gonna help, I mean, I hear your narrative about
Yeah.
its adjacency and how it's going to reflect its context, but, you know, I think seeing either photoshopped in a street elevation is going to help us understand that. And I don't know, you know, I think, I'm not sure logistically what the connection was here in terms of us seeing an electronic copy, but I think that not only helps the whole board, but it helps the public understand and follow along. Comments, questions?
if this will, your board have to declare lead agency in this case as well?
If they're going to a zoning board, probably want a coordinated review. I see he submitted the short form EAF, an unlisted actions, submitted the short form, probably want a coordinated review with the planning board acting as lead agency, I think.
And is that a motion we make here now?
It would be, yes.
Okay.
And then-
Probably makes more sense to do that than delve into the different components of the applications. We're going to probably be looking at this for several more meetings.
Are you seeking, other than the parking, when you return to the zoning, are there any other bulk and height elements that you're going to be seeking? when you
No,
move
it's
forward?
just the parking, because like I said again, we thought that the 25-foot, setback for the aqueduct is, will be a variance we can seek. If I'm understanding, that's not the case.
Does that provide you opportunity to introduce parking,
No.
the 25-foot
No.
setback?
Yeah, there's a provision in the code that it allows certain activities within that buffer, but not any construction of any structures or physical improvements.
Okay.
And JP already touched on the comment we had regarding the parking. Have you given any thought, or have you spoken to maybe the building department or fire, the property immediately to the north has, the windows and bay windows on that facade there, and you're gonna be building your building right on the property line, so.
No, we're
I'm
not.
just wondering if there's any.
We're not building the property. We are
I'm just wondering if
respecting
there's
the.
any, you might wanna talk to them, just wanna make sure that there's no issues
Adjacency
with
issue.
access
Yeah.
or, for fire, I
We're
don't
the
know.
same ownership, right?
The applicant owns both buildings, right?
Both buildings.
So there's an
yes.
opportunity to maybe do some
Yeah.
sort of mutual
Right,
improvement or,
it's just, it's worth a
Obligation.
conversation now,
Right.
if something needs to be done.
We
to
did
that
think,
building.
we moved 4 feet from the property line already to allocate for that. So we knew of the issues of with the bay windows. But we definitely can have something, since they're owned by the same person, both buildings are.
If you look, I'm sorry, Barbara, go
That's all
ahead.
right, go ahead.
If you look at the floor plan, a floor plan, of one of the typical upper floors, and so we don't see the adjacency of what Joe's referring to.
No, we can show that.
Yeah, I think that's gonna help us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we
bring
have,
it into focus.
if you look in our plan, we have not, there's no windows on that side of the building.
Okay, and some photographs are gonna help.
Yeah.
And can you just clarify, that floor plan there shows 2 one-bedroom and 2 two-bedroom?
This was,
Your calculations are saying, I think it's 9 and 6 you call out, but,
no, 9 and 3.
or 9 and 3, but by that count, if that's typical for 3 floors, it would be 6 of each, wouldn't it? And that would then affect your
Yeah,
parking
yeah.
calculation, so just
Okay.
verify that.
Weren't we only doing one-bedroom apartments?
No.
When did we switch to 2?
I don't know that we ever had
This is,
a
We're
stated,
doing 2 now. I mean, I'm concerned, yes, we need one-bedroom apartments desperately. On the other hand, we don't want to be accused of overcrowding, which is what it's going to do.
the one bedroom.
Yeah, well, no matter what we do, it's going to be overcrowded, but I just wanted
is
the
this,
public to know that we are aware of this situation.
So if we recap what Joe just clarified, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Michael. Where do we stand on
well,
the
that's gonna
unitary
change
standard?
because once, if I apply the 25 foot, that's gonna change my equation.
Right.
We may lose some apartments,
Okay.
yes. But I just for our design purposes, there is no, we can have 1 and 2 bedrooms. as-
No, there's no mandate or prescription for,
Okay.
No, except that the school board begs us not to do.
that's another dialogue.
Yeah.
And that should be part of the secret
Right,
evaluation.
that will ultimately be discussed in that context.
Okay.
So procedurally, we just need to make a motion for,
To declare yourselves
Lead agency.
the intent of the lead agency.
Can I ask a question before? My name is Robert Corky, I represent the applicant. On the setback, just out of clarification, I tried to find it myself today, I wasn't able to do that. Is it at a village setback or is that a state setback related to the aqueduct?
I don't know, I'll be honest with you, I don't know.
I did some research and I just couldn't find it, I didn't know.
I recall it being a state setback, because we've seen this on other projects, but I can't say that with all certainty.
Is that, if it were a state setback, if there weren't any construction that was gonna disturb the depth in the back, would that be a way of looking at it see if there was any exception, the way of working around that. Because I noticed when I walked the aqueduct, there's no continuity or consistency. I mean, I lived on the aqueduct, I rode it my drive for many years, so I'm familiar with it, I walked it down to the train many times. There's no continuity or consistency in terms of the proximity of the buildings to the aqueduct.
Right.
And I have a property in Yonkers, and I just happen to be familiar with it. And I work with the Conic State Park Commission with its maintenance, and I see that it's a little bit all over the place in terms of what's allowed and what's not allowed. So I just was looking for some clarification, if we run into a problem along the way, and I'm not sure, because again, this is just preliminary.
I think it was something that we dealt with quite a bit when we did the Avalon project, because it
Yeah.
kind of cut right down the middle, so I know there was some time and thought spent on that, and I know the research was done there, so.
So,
Yeah.
is that
Maybe that's
something where that was
In order to make that
advised for
crossing,
everyone?
the owner approached the state and got approvals for that crossing, and they were very particular in what they could and couldn't do. It was only the driveway, certain utilities, and they had to be installed a certain way.
If I'm not mistaken, JB, you had another project that,
Yeah, but, and actually, it's coming back, 173 in Island, we did, but that didn't affect our, I mean, we do have the,
but we discussed the 25-foot setback
Right,
during
but
that
we did not.
application.
but it goes back to, if you're going over that 25 foot, who do you, if you wanted to, who do you go to?
So-
Do you go to a zoning board? Is that a local law, or do we go to the state or the Taconic?
Let's sum it up by saying, question so noted, and we will research the answer to that.
Not to take it off, but after being told about the meeting, I happened to be down in the High Line, taking a walk, and I see the buildings there, a butt bed, some are set back. So I don't know, what
It's a valid
the guiding
question,
light on that.
and we'll,
Particularly since
There
we're
are
not crossing
existing
the
buildings
aqueduct.
already.
we'll find
That go to-
the answer.
Okay, thank you
I
very
wanna
much.
know the answer.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Want to make the motion, someone want to make the motion to declare the? Oh, is anyone here to speak to this application tonight? No one speaking, so.
So I guess I'll make the motion, we can adopt it as a combined review, we'll be lead agency. I think Mark asked for a long form environmental assessment form. Anything else that, staff?
I don't think right now. And what we would do then is to send out a letter to any other potentially involved agencies and say that we intended to be lead agency. If we don't hear from you within 30 days, we'll act upon that and become lead agency.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Planning Board 1416, William Baker. Croton Avenue. So we don't have an address for this project, is that?
Baker?
Yeah.
No, we don't have an address yet, and as I understand, we'll be adjourning. Because we still have some issues that we were dealing with engineering.
Okay. Is that consistent with everyone's understanding here
Yeah,
tonight?
we recently had a staff meeting
Correct.
with the owner, applicant, consultants to discuss our latest reviews, our review memos, and I think we're all in agreement with what needs to be done.
Just for clarification, Joe or Lynn, it does say on the agenda that we are waiting, if that just need to be modified, that we are waiting zoning approval, is that?
Is that a question form or a
Yes,
statement?
the question form, I'm just trying to, that doesn't mean that we're going to the next zoning board, that's still not.
I thought you guys indicated you want to go to the next zoning board.
Yes,
Right.
okay,
That's what I thought.
okay, just wanted to
I thought
clarify
that's
that.
what you were saying.
The problem, well, it's not a problem. The issue is, the zoning board can't do anything until you guys make your findings, and then they're supposed to make their own findings before they make their decision. Oftentimes, they review your findings and determine that they concur and adopt them as their own. So if to go to the zoning board and make an application, but with the understanding that the zoning board can't take an action until the secret evaluation is completed.
And as I understood it, that's where we left this discussion.
Right.
At the last
There
meeting.
was, okay, the discussion of the staff meeting, that's why I wanted to clear, to make sure that, so even if we go to the zoning board is gonna make a decision on the 14th.
They can't make a decision, right?
They can.
But elements of your secra, the information as discussed for you to complete the secra process, you're continuing?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Planning Board 02-17, Dan Beaton, I believe that's adjourned.
It is. It's
Plan-
on the agenda for formality.
Planning Board 06-17, Milton Villa, 25 Terrace.
Yeah, that was the letter that we forwarded to you
Right.
this afternoon. They asked to adjourn until next month.
Thank you. Planning Board 07-17, 63 Highland Avenue.
Yeah, this was before the zoning board, Mr. Fry, and the zoning board granted conditional variances. There's a front yard parking situation.
Yep.
And they granted conditional variances based upon them getting a conditional use permit from this board. They wanted plans prepared so that this board could look at it and make sure. The reason that they need the parking is because they want to have a basement apartment. They want to create a basement apartment.
So they're moving forward with preparing that information. Is that,
Yes, that's my understanding, yes.
did we expect to see them here tonight?
No.
Okay. On that note, we will move to Planning Board 08-17, Victoria Homes, 25 North Mountain. Joe is out tonight.
We give you a.
It is.
Because as I go through, Joe, you may want to point some things out. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. David Venditti from Victoria Home. Thank you. We were here last month when we got our first, 2 months ago. And we've been working on since getting our plan revised in accordance with comments that we received from the board and in conjunction with discussions with other staff and consultants on the part of the village. We thank you for those comments because they led to certain changes that we'll go through tonight with you. I did, however, want to start off pointing out a few corrections and a couple of changes that have been made that will impact the zoning worksheet that we gave you. First of all, it came to our attention that there was a typo, a misprint on the original one submitted to you, and the previous approval was for 4 stories, not 3.5, and it's the same number of stories that we're looking for, except slightly less footage in height. Likewise, I think the comparison was previously 54 feet, and now it's 51 feet. The building footprint previously, as approved, was 40,819 square feet. It is about 25,291 now, about a 38% reduction. Variances before were 8 categories, but many more than that in terms of overall number. It's now 6 categories, but many, many less in number. However, there is one place where there was a slight increase. I had previously thought that there would be no increase in variance, but there was one. Because of comments we received from this board, I think there's been a very favorable reconfiguration of the front of the property. Ms. Kopkowski, I believe that you had mentioned that you weren't so thrilled with the way the front entrance appeared and the way it was set back and angled and the amount of distance uncovered by, that had to be traversed by patients and visitors. Joe, can we possibly go to the you know, the look, the imaging of the front. There's been a redesign of the front, which I hope that you'll be as happy about as we are. And it, yeah, just the total front with the octagon tower. Yeah, do we have isn't there a singular view of that or no?
Go down, keep going, stop right there. On the left.
On the left. It was redesigned so that the front, Bob, I was looking for, I thought there was a sheet that just showed on one sheet what the front would look like. We looked at it at the meeting the other day.
Why don't
on the
you
WebEx.
begin, if I may suggest, by talking about how you got to where you are
Okay,
currently on.
well, I was trying to get to that in a somewhat circular route, but basically, based upon the comments we received, there was a redesign of the front to look like a more inviting front entrance of a building.
Dave,
And,
can I jump in here?
yes, please, Richard.
I think that this was like where we left off.
Right.
There were some questions, so let's go back to
Yeah.
let's go back to the plan. Because I think that's the issue. Richard Rosen, the Perkins Eastman Architects. The last time we were here, we had submitted something that didn't have enough time to bake, so to speak, and I think we, through your comments, there were questions about addressing the street front, and there were also some issues of travel distance. So what we did was we took the comments very seriously, and we went back to the drawing board literally, and what we found was that to address the problem of distance and also addressing the street, we found that instead of having the two pieces of the building as parallel to each other, we cranked the southernmost piece to be parallel to the street, and what that did was several things. Number one, it shortened the distance by about 40 to 45 feet from the drop-off circle, and it also opened up the courtyard. There are also questions of not having views for folks down to the river. So what that enabled us to do was to do two things at once, which is to really address the street, create a very nice entry sequence into the building. And also, not only is it an entry sequence, but what we've been able to do is introduce stopping points along the way. And also, when you're coming here, we also widened the covered entry to create a little outdoor porch. And also, as you enter into the building here, we've created an octagonal function room both on the first floor and on each of the other floors for families and other activities for the residents with a wraparound porch. And we're able to do that, which also emulates a piece of the existing Victoria home, which we were able to introduce. And what it did was it also gave a sort of a fulcrum where the volume of the building rotated, and it also made a clear indication of where the main door was. So,
Richard, on this thumb drive, do we have that front view that we looked at in the WebEx? You may have it by hard copy.
Well, can we go one more question here, but another site plan may, I think one of the other points of dialogue, and I believe Joe brought this up, Joe Clark, was how are you accommodating sequentially the construction on the site?
That's part of the presentation.
That'll be
Yes,
there.
we absolutely.
But I think
present
this
that to you.
design, part and parcel of this design reflects how you're going to accomplish that too.
And I think not only did we modify the form, but the building position actually slid a little bit further down the hill to allow the existing building to stay functioning. I think we'll have a presentation from our representative from the Andron Construction. Dave, were you going to address that this evening about the sequencing of the
Yes,
construction?
Dave's going to address that for us, the sequencing. This is what I was referencing though, and there is a drawing at some point that shows you the front view, which is actually quite attractive. This is an 8-sided tower as a front entrance, and that is a,
No, to your left.
I'm sorry, there's a covered porch, right?
That's the tower, that's the tower.
And that's what, I'm sorry, that's the entrance. That's what creates the slightly greater variance in the street because of this porch. And that 8-sided tower will incorporate, as you can see in the window structures, some of the historic features from Victoria Home to bring those elements into the building itself.
Terrific. The existing parking lot
Remains.
as is.
As is.
Resurfaced?
It's being expanded by 7 spaces.
To the south.
Yes.
And it will be resurfaced.
Okay. But that angle is existing that we see
Yes,
there
that's
now.
correct.
And then,
It's also lower grade than.
right, significantly lower. So
That's lower, and this is up here closer to the street.
the stairs linking that we see here on the site plan, right there. Yep. Those are kind of Are they existing or are those?
Those are
new?
existing, that's
Okay.
basically the existing. They'll be reconstructed, but that's existing.
I mean, one of the questions, I think, in terms of the site and vehicular circulation was maybe a public comment, related to a public comment, either more recently or in the original application, but in terms of truck access and deliveries. So how, what's happening in that? On this site plan, how is that?
All of that comes in here.
Yes.
All that's been moved away from the major residential portion with respect to Matilda and the more northerly part of South Malcolm, and we brought it into there right by the woods, into that entrance, so that the truck entrance will basically be hidden, and that's also where ambulance and emergency vehicles can still go inside the building. And it will accommodate also box-type truck deliveries.
Registration code.
Right.
And the hierarchy of the three parking lots, staff, visitors, how is that?
Yeah.
Visitors is closest.
Yeah, this primarily staff,
Mm-hmm.
visitor.
And what we've also introduced is we've introduced a portico share here so that visitors can be dropped off and then they can walk covered from here into the main entrance here. And then if anybody decides to stay, they can circle back around and park and then also then come back into the building.
Is there any parking at all at this lower end for employees? I'm not sure when I look at it.
At the moment, no, I think.
Yep,
At
This
at this end,
is
no.
the area that's meant for the employees.
Well, would it be enough for the maintenance people? Because wouldn't maintenance be more at that end?
Well,
That's all right, think
Yeah.
about it.
I mean, at this point, we just envision all the employees parking.
I think to make more parking down there, we would have to do more excavation
Yeah.
and more clearing of land. I think we tried to minimize that,
Yes.
you know, with the smaller building.
And I think that even though we've reduced this by 30 beds, the amount of parking has not been reduced by that much.
We've increased it.
Actually increased it by how many?
Two, I think it was.
7 spaces from the original? No, I think it's 6.
From the 120 beds, so there's more than adequate parking compared to what was previously approved.
That, well, let's,
Come back.
so let's talk about this.
Okay.
So this shows where the new structure is versus the previous approved two structures. I think what you're not seeing is you're not seeing the original footprint of Victoria Home.
Right, that would have
And
been
that's
the
what-
third component. to
And that's
this.
what you're asking about. And I think what we've done is that we've analyzed what, the building has to stay in operation while the construction is going on. So basically what's coming off is the wraparound porch, and part of the historic structure up to the new part in the middle, which is the transition between the mansion and the brick, the 1920s colonial building. And that's where the current kitchen operates and has to stay in operation. So that's how we're keeping this in operation with the same parking and the same access now, and this building will essentially be away
Yeah.
from the
So,
new building.
here's, just, I think you listened and you responded, and at least from my point of view, it's a very positive response. And I think it's probably stronger, better, faster even than the first, in many ways.
Agreed, absolutely.
But the only notion I would share here, I think is demonstrated in this diagram. And you're not gonna solve it now, other than to be sensitive about, as opposed to having a building anchor the corner, now we have a collection of parking lots anchoring the corner. So, and I get it, right, that's where we are. You in a sensitive and clever manner, I think, solved all the other planning issues and architectural issues. But maybe there's an opportunity when we get to that point for buffering and planning, whatever we can do, so we don't have the corner signature be parking lots.
We
There are
have
some-
we have a landscape plan.
To show you,
And that's something.
and it looks good.
We can address, so I think, and you are a landscape architect, right?
No, I am not. I'm married to one, perhaps that's a rumor.
But I misspeak, but.
John, I'm sorry, on the parking, we went from 69 spaces for the 120 bed to 67 spaces for the 90 bed, to make sure that there was gonna be no demand on the street parking.
But it's up 7 spaces from the previous plan.
No, I understand.
Right. So if I may address what you just spoke about, I think the landscape plan really speaks to that, in that our landscape architects have created a tree screen for the lower levels, so that really, if you wanna sort of blur your eyes a little bit and see this as a smaller version of a Hudson River estate, where you don't enter right into the mansion, there's an approach where you can drive past the building, and then you drive into the site, and then you come and then you approach it, and then you drop people off at the formal porte cochere. So on a smaller scale, it is sort of a traditional strategy of placing a building in a site, where the views are, and then you approach it indirectly. And I think that lower parking lot, because it is lower, will have less prominence.
I tend to agree. I mean, I drove back up there after we had this initial dialogue, after you shared the first plan. And, tried to envision what you're proposing, and even moving the building further down. And one of the notions is that, okay, that existing parking lot is significantly lower. There's a little knob up there, and, I think you've recognized what you can do up there, and I think the landscape plan's gonna go a long way, obviously.
And John, knowing what the board wants, it's always been, one of the charges here is to have great and copious landscaping, so that, to minimize any impact on neighbors.
Right, if we're not gonna have a building, let's have a park-like.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So maybe we should move on and show you sort of the views that we've created based on the.
Do you have an on-grade elevation of what you just showed before, though, with the landscape plan? And I forget what that street is that Matilda, the one that cuts?
Matilda on the side, yeah. I think there's some that'll show that.
That'll show you.
Okay, because I think that would be helpful too, to take, go a little bit further to kind of explain that, landscaping and trying to soften up that parking lot look.
Well, we're not really showing landscaping on these elevations, but I think, as you can see, there is a drop in the site, and I think what we've been able to do is actually use the tower and the wraparound porch as a transition point to have this, so that, in fact, actually, instead of having a retaining wall as the base of the porch, we've actually had the porch sort of sit up like a real porch, which enables us to then gradually drop the grading and actually reduce the impact of the retaining walls, which step gradually down the hill. And what we tried to do is tie the steps of the retaining walls to the architecture itself, where the building moves slightly in and out. So tried to make it gradual as opposed to, like a dam and then a 20-foot drop, and so that it'll go down gradually. And I think the planting will step up, the hill along with that, and hug the base of the walls to reduce their impact.
And right, Richard, this is where we're talking about concentrating some of the adaptive reuse of architectural features to make it be the center point of the structure.
That's all good, in my mind.
Yes.
You do eventually come to the lower left-hand side.
We do.
Yeah.
Right, and
We do. We should show you what the planting of that is in the constructed view from the photographs.
so how does, I think we had similar dialogue on the original application.
Right.
For example, at that corner.
Yep.
In terms of establishing the composite height of the building, and we're not gonna answer this tonight, but this is a multifaceted building. There are a lot of aspects to calculating the height of this building in some net value. And I think we're gonna wanna see diagrammatically how you've done that at some point. And I suspect that planning.
And my understanding is, as compared to what was previously approved, that we have and that being the greater area variance, that we have a net a net 3 feet lower in height.
I hear the narrative.
Yeah.
So from a massing point of view.
Hopefully it's shown by scientific calculation.
Yeah, without, I mean, we could show the diagram and like where the grades were taken and then what the average grade, but I think just in terms of the strategy, you know, for developing the massing gene, if you zoom out for a bit, I think what we, you know, in the end, we still have to accommodate, nursing rooms for care. And so what we've tried to do is break big blocks of rooms into pairs and then express them volumetrically. But the big difference from the last thing that was approved is that when you turn the corner, if you go to the lower elevation, you can sort of see it here, is that we, rather than make the lower level another pair of paired gables with the center, we've actually turned the roof the other way to reduce the visual impact.
And I think that's all successful.
And to make it, much less of a vertical expression, and also to try to break the mass up in a different way with a bay window, and then ultimately down, to the lower levels, which are the support levels of the building.
I'm speaking more towards a fact-finding mission and
Yeah.
record-keeping.
Absolutely. And do we have on here though,
The color pictures, yes.
the color
Yes.
pictures with it? Yeah, I think that would be great to show you at least what we envision for the type of actual view that you'll have.
So these are the view sheds as they are now, and then with the new proposed elevation and the actual planting from the landscape architects, and that's along Malcolm Street. And then even from down here, as you look up the hill, a lot of the height of that building is taken up, by the proposed tree plantings on that area there. So we think by actually having the time to study it and to really reduce the effect of the massing, we think it's a better neighbor and fits well into the neighborhood and the topography.
Barbara,
Yes,
you have a question?
no?
So is that the view of the parking lots?
No, that's right from North Malcolm. We'll be on Matilda. Do we have a Matilda side?
Yeah, that's what I was mentioning before, if you had an image of what that's gonna look like with maybe the softening with the buffer, with
I don't think
trees.
we have that yet, but we
and so
can create that. I think for tonight, we've been literally like tuning up the architecture and then coordinating the landscape. We can finish that.
I think,
view.
just speaking for myself, that would
Yeah.
help me kind of visualize.
Right, and that's all, that's down here.
Mhm.
So that'll be down here. So I think we can add that to this view and maybe make a composite view and sort of show you the full impact.
And this Counselor, to go really to your comments that you made last time, this, and we'll get it. There is a better view that'll show you without the landscaping, but to make this the focal point and a real front entrance to the building. That was one of your concerns last time.
So that's all retaining walls, what we see as like the,
Yes, that's correct.
Which those, I suspect there's still gonna be some dialogue.
I'm sorry?
I suspect there's still gonna be some dialogue as the science of the retaining walls are
Yes.
introduced.
But they have, again, they have gone down from last time. The only thing, as I said, that went up slightly was to really make a more homey, estate-like look and an inviting look for a front entrance. To the octagonal tower, we added the wraparound porch.
It was actually, the porch was what moved a little closer to
Right.
the street, not the actual.
Not the building itself.
Not the actual structure.
In terms of truth in advertising,
Yes.
the large growth trees we see there, were those photoshopped in from an existing streetscape, tree line? Are those existing or are those?
They're 75% growth from the landscape architect.
So they're new trees at
Yes.
75?
But there are some existing trees up closer to the existing parking lot that are staying.
Right, there are, right? I think there's an
Yes.
opportunity for
Yes.
numerous trees. So, you know.
If you look at the other view, if you look up the hill, you see the existing trees.
The other thing that by changing the massing and sort of shoving part of the building forward, we were able actually to give ourselves a little more distance from the very, very large specimen tree in the back of the building that's, on the edge of the rock outcropping there. So it helped the site breathe a little bit more in the back and gave us, more presence in the front.
This is the existing comparison. You can see there are a lot of pretty mature trees that will remain.
We're gonna move this along.
Yes.
Any further questions?
No.
Okay, do you have another part?
Yes, we have, I'm sorry, Joe, did you have anything else? Because otherwise Dave is going to talk about the staging, which was obviously of, great importance to you.
Thank you.
Joe, your memo, they've got this, they're gonna review.
We received it this afternoon, it was single response.
There's some points on there.
Yeah, for long.
Kind of housekeeping and.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're good, we expect that anyway.
Do we have the
Slides?
visuals?
It's pretty cool.
I'll do, that's okay.
Okay.
That's your flash
Yeah.
drive, so whatever's on that flash drive. is-
And we submitted the drawings to the town, right?
Which one?
To the village?
Which one?
The site plan?
No, I don't know if it's on this latest thumb drive, so, but you're gonna have to wing it.
I can do it. I can do
Okay,
it.
I'll point for you.
No, I can do it.
Okay.
But they got the submittal as part of the package.
Yeah, they should have, on the previous submission.
Okay, well,
The
good
one that was
evening.
on October 6th?
Yes.
That's the
And it
most
should have been,
recent
like a, flow diagram and site plan of the phases. Should have been part of this set.
Wanna look? Sure. That's all right, I can do it.
Okay.
It's on video, so we'll go back and review this.
Okay, good evening, my name is David Shunter, I work for Andron Construction. Just a little bit of background about me, I have a Bachelor of Civil Engineering degree, and I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New York. I've worked for Andron for 32 years. My task is to help Victoria Home during the planning phases for safety, quality, budget, and schedule. I was at the last meeting where I heard there was questions about how we're going to keep everybody who lives in Victoria Home safe and the visitors, and that's my primary task to explain to you tonight. Do we have the existing site plan anywhere in there, Jeannie?
It should be in there. How do I?
Yeah, go into, get back to the main folder.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go to the top.
That's okay.
Maybe it's there. Yeah, that's your folder. That's your flash drive.
Okay, go to the original,
Is it this?
oh,
Go up, up.
you're right.
Existing condition.
Yep, right there.
Sorry, I can't see. Is it the
Bottom
first
one.
one?
No,
Bottom
last
one.
one, it's the
Last
third
one,
one.
thank you.
There you go.
No, that's-
My glasses are not that
That's all right, okay. So I know you're all familiar with the site, but I just want to orient everybody. Can you blow it up a little bit?
Yeah.
I just want to orient everybody. So this is the existing mansion at this point, and then this is also part of the mansion. And there was like a one-story addition that was built later on. That's where the main entrance is. And then the three-story or the four-story portion of the building starts here. So a couple of issues for Victoria Home. The main entrance to the building has to stay in operation because this is where all the visitors come in. This is also where the ambulances come in. So we have to keep this in operation. And what I've been working with Mario on is we sited the building about 30 feet down the hill. So the plan right now is that we'll take out this existing portion right here. And we'll get those drawings to the village that we prepared. But this piece will come down, there'll be a 30-foot buffer between what's going to remain and where the construction will start. And that'll do two things. That'll allow emergency egress or access for any, fire trucks. It'll also allow, this is where the ambulances come if anybody needs to be taken care of. We'll also maintain the access to the back parking lot off of Matilda. There won't be any parking there. The plan right now is to create a temporary parking area in front of the existing brick structure. We'll move everyone out of this parking area into here, and then Andron will need to access this to bring materials around to the back to where the addition's going to go. We'll also have a construction entrance down where that permanent entrance is located. So just putting it all together, maintain emergency access in the front, maintain emergency access in the back. We'll take this portion down, the existing kitchen is right here, and one of the key things for Victoria Home is they need to be able to keep that in operation. So that idea about taking the mansion down first, it's not gonna work. So we're gonna take down a deconstructed portion of the building. And then there's the boiler for the buildings under here. We'll have to make sure we get some, heating. All the power comes from this side. So the idea is that we're gonna segregate the construction area. There won't be any construction vehicles that'll come in the front. The only way a construction vehicle will access the site will be through the new entrance. Jeannie, can you go to the new plan?
Yep, go back out again.
So, first thing we'll do is create this constructed entrance. At this point, we'll move everybody out of this parking lot and build the temporary parking lot in the front. There won't be any construction vehicles allowed in the existing drive, and we'll need to access the back portion of the site for a certain time period to bring materials back there. We're thinking that the building's going to be prefabricated, somewhat off-site. The walls will be prefabricated, the floor systems will be prefabricated. That will do two things. It'll minimize the amount of time that we're working on the site, and it'll also allow us to get the building shell up faster. And then, the quicker we get the building enclosed, I think that will be better for the residents of the community. And one of the key things that we're going to be working on with the administration, with Phyllis, Fred, and Jim, is that DOH, Victoria Home is heavily regulated by the Department of Health. So as part of their approval from the DOH, and when they submit this project to DOH, we have to create a pretty detailed safety plan. And I heard a comment last month that maybe the town would like to look at that, so we'll have that ready sometime in December. We'll be happy to sit down with everybody and go through it carefully, but it'll have, how do we maintain, food service, medical service, ambulance service, emergency access, egress out of the building, where will the visitors come and go. It's a pretty detailed plan that we have to develop for DOH, and we would do it anyway because our primary charge is to construct the buildings and so that everybody can live there. And we actually think that usually when the construction starts, people get pretty excited about it because it's pretty exciting. It'll be this beautiful new building, and we're going to keep everybody segregated. So we'll be on this side, Victoria Home will be on that side. We'll finish the new building, everybody will move in, and then we'll have to deconstruct the existing building. So it's going to be a little chaotic during this phase because we have to create that new parking. So at that point, we're gonna have to maybe close down, some of the parking to allow the building to be deconstructed. So there is gonna be a phase where, I know there's been a concern about, parking on the street. I could see maybe during the demolition phase, some of the staff's gonna have to park on the street until we can build the new parking lots. So.
Dave, how long is the demolition phase?
It's gonna be a couple months. It's a pretty big building, but it'll come down pretty quickly. It'll be at the end. And then what we'll do is, we're gonna be back here next month, right? So we'll come with the drawings that we created, and we'll have diagrams, but we've done a preliminary plan.
Terrific.
Yeah, and there'll be a very detailed safety plan that we will be happy to share with everybody. But we take that charge very seriously, and so I think we'll be able to demonstrate to you that everybody's gonna be safe. So.
Can you give us any time frame?
You mean the duration? Sure. You mean the duration of construction?
Yes.
We believe it's going to take about 18 months altogether. So from the time we start, which we're targeting a June 1st start date. July. Or July, okay, July. We expect that it will take 18 months. So it'll take about 16 months to get the building done, and then a couple of months to do the demolition.
Thank you.
The building will get closed in about a year, so.
I just have one question. Regarding this construction vehicles, will there be any restriction on these vehicles coming and going during the peak traffic hours?
Well, we are required to follow the regulations of the town and of the village, pardon me, so I don't know, I'd have to
I think the
look.
simple answer is yes. because there are a series of standards in terms of.
We'll have to follow the standards.
But we can certainly, we'll identify those.
Yeah.
And one of them, that's a good question.
And that's something that we address in the original environmental impact statement,
Yeah.
and that will be up, those numbers, in the comparison that we gave you the last time, and the write-up we gave you the last time speaks to that, and we're going to incorporate Dave's sequencing plan, and it'll spell that out also.
Thank you. Not to abbreviate this, but I've got to keep this moving.
I'm sorry, I just have one comment, one question really for Mark in the middle.
Hang on one second.
Okay.
We're gonna try to prefabricate most of the building off-site, so I think that will help. I thought your question was really just of like how many vehicle trips. I haven't sat down and calculated that yet, but we're gonna build a lot of the shell off-site and then transport, so I think that will help with traffic on the street, and that'll help get us in there faster and out of there faster, so I think it'll be a net benefit to the community.
Okay. Does anyone here from the public have questions regarding the presentation so far? Okay.
Mark, I just have one question for you. You know, a couple times we've extended the previous approvals, both from the planning and zoning board.
Right.
You know, could you let me know, not today, but give it some thought as to whether you think we should still procedurally extend those because they're coming up in November and December? Is there anything to be protected with respect to, you know, site plan amendment and versus letting those approvals just totally lapse, even though we're proceeding down a different avenue right now?
You're talking about the SECRA evaluation?
Well, we're really just the overall site plan approval and variance approvals. Even though we're changing now, we're amending the site plan, is there a reason to technically have those extended further as opposed to just going on? Because it obviously will go past the expiration of those approvals.
So I would say that probably we should do some type of motion to extend the time. Usually, I think under the planning board, it's done for a period of
Year at a time, yeah.
year. And you get up to 2 extensions for a year. And then the zoning board, I want to say it's a 6-month.
Yeah, I think we've had one so far with the planning board, so maybe you can consider that we're requesting that, and then we'll do whatever we need to with respect to making the same type of requests for the zoning board, just to technically keep those alive.
Mm-hmm. And David, do you have a date that it technically expires? Usually we do it the month before.
Yeah, it's November, I believe it's November for the zoning board, but I'll check and get back to you. I know they were separated by a month because we got the zoning board first, and then they sent us back to get the final approval with the planning board.
So usually we can just do it by letter. If you send in a letter to the
Great.
zoning board and the planning board saying, I want to extend it for a year, we're working on this.
Super.
That would be great.
Thank you, Mark.
Moving right along. Planning
Thank you.
board application 0917, 86 South Highway. 86 South Highland. Going once, going twice, moving on. Planning board application 10-17 we covered as a part, haven't we, as part of the previous?
Wait, 86 South Highland, there
Is no one here to
No,
speak?
she did not adjourn, but they did submit an application to the zoning board
Okay.
based on your advice to them last time, so that could be last.
Correct.
Adjourn to November.
Yeah.
10-17 we've covered. 11-17
Yep.
we've discussed, unless you're going to,
No.
are you standing up because you have more to discuss on that?
Yes.
12-17 Maple Lodge, 173 North Highland.
Yes. Well, this one as well, I apologize, I don't have the digitals, I will have it for next month. This is a project I'm sure the board is familiar with. We have received approvals in, I believe it was 2014, then again in 2017. This is a 4.8 acre, which is currently Brandon Furniture. We have approvals to do a snack shop, 22,000 square foot gym, and 80,000 square feet of self-storage. Since we were here the last time we got the approvals, the approval have expired, and we still have pending from the last approval some engineering that needed to be completed. That's why we are in front of the board. We are resubmitting the application, and we received the comments today from Clarence Session, from Joe, and we know that there is still some work to be done on the engineering comments.
So for the record, you want to just give us the highlights of those items?
Sure. There's improvements along the frontage of the property. They're going to require a highway work permit from the DOT. I'd like to see the details of that. We had questioned any bulk storage requirements for the fuel station and how that may or may not affect the plan. There were some retaining walls that exceeded 5 feet in height, so we'd like to see some design on those. Let's see. Some minor details regarding directional signage, pavement markings, some additional signage we would like them to consider, or some that we would require. Site lighting and photometric plan should be prepared. Soil testing for the stormwater mitigation practices. The locations, let's see, apologize. Actually, the testing was performed, testing was performed. We witnessed some of them, actually, did we? We didn't, I'm sorry, it's been so long. We didn't witness them. They're showing the plan. We need to work that out with the engineer and get probably some additional soil testing done. Westchester County Department of Environmental Facilities has their standard I&I requirements. The applicant had previously spoken to the village engineer about televising some of the existing sewers, see if there's any means or ability to maybe repair some existing leaking. That needs to be done. Stormwater.
I believe that was done, but we will get you.
I think it was done, but we never saw the actual
Okay.
video report of results, so we need to see that. Some stormwater details need to be worked out. Let's see. Yeah, they had a freestanding sign that was proposed, it's shown in the right-of-way, so that'll need to be rearranged, and then some other minor technical details.
So my question, JP, is you acknowledge and agree with those are the items remaining?
Please refresh my memory. That derelict house that sits on the corner,
That's part of the project will be demolished.
it will be demolished. Thank you.
Any questions on this side of the table? Any questions from the audience? If you would stand here, I guess, and
Whatever pleases the board.
I think that's fine. Because maybe we can generate, if there are questions, we can generate dialogue. If you please share your name.
Sounds good, yeah. Christopher Feldman, I'm an attorney with the law firm Harris Beach, PLLC in White Plains. We represent the entity with interest in the neighboring property, 171 North Highland Global Partners LP. We have a couple issues with this application. Number one,
I'm sorry, 171 is?
just to the, I believe it's the south
Okay.
of the project, kind of south of the entryway.
Is that the gas station
Yeah,
on the
gas
corner?
station, yes,
Okay.
that's correct. So we have a couple issues in that, number one, when we looked at the application for this project, it lists only lot 11 on the application, but when we reviewed the drawings, it seems that lots 7, 8, and 10 are also being modified. The 4 lots involved seem to have 4 different owners. We didn't see an authorization that They were on board with all of the project that was being proposed.
Not to interrupt, is this a long list? Should we answer
No,
these one at a
there,
time?
there's
or-
only
Okay.
4 or 5 things. If you want, we can go one by one.
No, I'm not sure we're going to be able to answer it.
That's why I figured I'd
Okay,
kind of get
thank
through
you.
it, and then we could address what's available. Additionally, it looks like there's one large property being created that's going to have 3 primary uses on it. Under the zoning code, the gas station, a retail store, and a self-storage facility are all primary uses that are now going to be on one parcel. None of those are accessory uses which would be used. So we think it's a proper.
Primary uses under which, they're all retail uses, right?
Well, no, under the code, gas stations are an automotive-related use. So that's the primary use, is an automotive-related use.
Well, I'm not
And
gonna
then-
suggest that we're gonna make that determination here, I'm not so sure that that's been the interpretation over time, but we will question so noted.
That's fine. Additionally, all these different uses are gonna be on the one property, and the uses seem to be interdependent with parking and driveways and such all together. Additionally, I didn't see any approval for the self-storage facility, which requires a conditional approval from this board. It's not an as-of-right use and has to be approved by the board. I didn't see that in the application that was submitted. That would be under zoning code section 270-5. And then I also saw that the plans, again, are pretty old in this case. Some of them date back to 2013. Here we are in 2017. I didn't see any revisions or updates to maybe take into account some changes in the area that have occurred over the last 4 years.
Okay, so, we have a list of questions. So is the aggregate, how are we to summarize the aggregate observations you've made? Are these in opposition or support?
These would probably be in opposition, yes.
So if those items are cleaned up or answered, or
Would we not oppose, would we not oppose the
what are we to
project?
summarize? Are your oppositions cleaned up and removed?
I mean, we only were notified about this project just recently, so we haven't really had a chance to get our full
So I
arms
think-
around it, but we wanted to come and
Right, no, I
provide
understand, and I think,
our
you know,
issues.
in all fairness, this application in one form or another, in a reasonable facsimile of past applications, has been here at least 2 or 3 years, maybe longer.
Long time.
So I'm not sure how the recent awareness is come about.
I understand, but
Right, okay.
this is where it is, and this project is now before your board for applications that it needs approval. So regardless of the fact that it's been here 2 or 3
I'm
times
just,
before.
you brought up a notion,
No.
and I'm sharing an equal and I think fair observation.
No,
This
I
was an
appreciate it.
approved project that was extended a few times, so I think there's something.
No, that-
you said.
That's fair.
And we will
answer.
We will answer those, and just to, you know, one quick one, it's 4 different property, 4 different owners, but it's all related to the same.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm suggesting, everyone here is gonna have an observation that, have the questions been submitted in terms of a letter or?
No, but we can prepare
I
one
think
prior to the next
I would
meeting.
suggest that, and then conversely, they can be answered
No,
or not answered.
That's what we had
Either way.
planned, so.
Anything else?
That's anything from our side.
Anyone else here to speak to this application? Thank you. Okay, so you've acknowledged the, okay.
Procedurally, Mark, this does need to go back to the EAC, correct?
I believe it does.
Since everything's expired, this is a new application.
Do we have to do the same thing, lead it, no, we don't need lead agency with us? Just to make sure procedurally.
So in terms of the next meeting, you're going to make headway on answering, providing the technical questions. I'm guessing that there's going to be correspondence based on some of the public comment tonight. Hopefully, everyone will cooperate so that the public comment is submitted in time, that answers can be provided for the applicant by next meeting. And that makes everybody's life move along.
So we need updated variances, correct?
No variances.
Okay.
There's no variances.
So you don't have to go back to the zoning
The
board.
only thing I will, I mean, if we review this, Mark, and we feel that this needs to be also conditional use, I guess we will have to amend our application
To
to.
the planning board?
Yes.
Okay, no, I'm just trying to make sure that you don't need a coordinated review and have to declare lead agency. I mean,
Right, no, that's.
you guys are the only approval, so you would be the.
Right. Anything else? Barbara?
No.
Okay, final call. Thank you. Okay, do we need to speak to the referral for the Snowden Woods project any further?
Not interested.
We didn't speak to them.
Not really, but we kind of spoke about it.
Yeah.
There being no further official agenda items, would we like to take a short break before we dive into the work session? We have 3 minutes.
Do you want to adjourn the?
4 minutes.
Go ahead.
Do I hear a motion to
Do you want
adjourn?
to adopt
Wait,
the
before you
minutes?
adjourn, do you accept the minutes and the resolutions from last month?
Thank you for keeping me in line, Lynn. Barbara, you want to make a motion to accept the minutes?
Yes, I
And
accept
resolutions.
I
the
second.
minutes as
Submitted.
submitted, thank you.
Okay.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
And are you going to vote to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the public meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Want to take a short break?
Yes.
3 minutes, 4
Go ahead.
minutes?
Staying here, staying this way.
We have a work session. We get overtime.
We get to miss the first couple innings of the World Series.
Oh, I'm sorry, I know. When I saw this coming together, I'm like,
You can't use it as
I
a
don't know if we
season.
can get it in up here. The split screen.
Who was the Yankees?
Sure,
Did we
extreme-
far less-
Oh, can you
Yeah.
imagine? I had not connected the dots on that. Hey.
Can have the picture.
Will I give you a snack while I'm on?
You don't need it if we didn't really care. You could have your iPhone down here watching the game while. Hey, Joe.
Enjoy it there rather than a small screen. Freedom, sorry.
Good,
Enjoy the group by discussing.
Yeah, we're awful fed tonight.
He's in Mount Kisco tonight as well. Forward day.
There's everything. Good to see you.
So what's the story with? Yes. Very nice to meet you.
Okay. Because the only thing I saw and heard about it, I saw in the Gazette, it just kind of made it sound like the planning board was kind of being obstructionist and not really. Maybe they could have just let the guy wrote the story.
Will we have that issue and then I was wondering about how we did the secret.
Actually, we moved here when I was in eighth grade, so I went to graduate also.
I didn't even look to see if they.
Yeah, the short form is pretty long.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was weird. We had to
This
part
one
one.
wasn't that much.
Are you doing your map?
I appreciate you facilitating a vote on this. Well, no, that was on another case.
Especially some people are right, so, yeah, that's true.
Right, it's like, there's gonna be an office, usually would be a few different things.
So that's,
You can just answer your office, just
Did I remove the Great Wall of China here?
Because the village up there, they're just kind of.
I'm ready. I don't think the engineers here.
Well, I think, you want to start? Can we start?
Well, given that.
You know, it's hard, but most of the times, there's gonna be someone, you know, as a guy, you don't, I can do Never.
I just don't rely on, you know.
I didn't know if there was any.
You're on there forever.
And ask if there were. He's an architect, he thought it was gonna be community. Sometimes Richard gets tired.
I really thought, that was gonna be a good project for downtown.
Oh, I'll get the recap from Mike. Later.
We're gonna have extra 3.5. Be with extra
Full copy of the map.
Okay.
It's just an extra, it's just,
Because you don't have.
Is that usually?
Yep.
Yes, actually, I'm gonna say something?
Yep. You're Victoria.
Brothers Fish and Chips.
Hi, very well.
Well, did I tell you?
That should be down there. We gotta get over. And you go all the way from home?
So JB, I never met your brother before.
We're waiting for the,
This is the package that Joe got. This is mine, that was given to us.
Oh, is that the one?
I'm sorry, I meant to send you the.
Oh,
We can get that up on the screen.
It's a follow-up to the one that you got, which was the.
Oh.
Lynn, we don't have electronically, but maybe we can flip it to the,
Make sure it's the right page.
is this what you're talking about? Something. Lynn, the color-coded one?
Yeah, I think this is valuable.
Okay, let me try to get it. I think it's easier to go all the way.
We don't have this in the electronic file?
No, I just have to.
Oh.
Listen, what about this? Oh, oh, that's even better. Okay, connected to the top of that.
You know, why, can you, are we gonna have anything on the monitor tonight?
No, you're.
Okay, so you can just move that around and
We have a full.
maybe you wanna speak to that?
Paul will when he gets, he created this.
Here, I have a lot.
Yeah.
We're FedEx on a ride, but I know it was right.
Something
Yeah,
like
well,
that.
we didn't get it. Well,
I FedExed them to everybody.
no, it's individually,
Work,
and they
yes.
just got them to their homes. You sent them
No,
to their
I
home
wasn't,
addresses?
no, I would send them to Village Hall.
To 16 Crow. We got everything that was submitted to 16 Crow was given to us, and that was
I mean, I don't have home addresses, and I wouldn't presume to send them to their homes
Right,
anyhow.
because we're not in 16 Crow.
No, I know,
Right,
I know.
So, I don't have anything else other than.
Because this is a lot closer to those.
I actually heard that it's very well, they were
And it shows,
deep
yeah.
six and the mail was.
Yeah, I'm gonna give
Yeah,
this to-
when you're there, it's a difference for a
What?
second.
Absolutely.
Oh.
You wanna take a look? One of the pieces of information
Might be able to.
kind of been talking about for a long time, illustrating the various parts of this. Adjacent.
so this is the point by
2 minutes?
point.
Yeah.
John, he says it's 2 minutes away.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this is where the water is.
Okay, that's fine.
Do you want to do the Google?
Yes.
Are you going across?
This is the parcel.
There's a.
There's a house up on the hill here.
The only other thing that was in
The
my.
rest of this is like a construction yard.
You know, my FedEx.
These are some
Right,
buildings
that's
in
it,
here,
that's what I just gave John like that to you.
air, construction.
There's the other question. I
The only thing is the conduit area, which is what you.
Okay, not even 2 minutes.
So much easier to
Yeah,
understand.
right,
You are in.
Put it up there, I'll look at it.
These are the new construction.
Mine is up there now.
I said, yeah. I said, Wednesday night, one choice.
Okay, no, that I didn't. I had a village trustee sit in on a meeting with me and a mayor and
See the right side, just go back and listen.
I think that could be an elevation.
A fully developed.
Well, the width,
The mayor said.
well, it's scaled, so we just have to look at the scale. And it got there,
We borrowed the map behind
You don't mind to come to the gym, do you?
So that's why I can have
It says 24-foot minimum. I don't know if that carries. Assuming if it is 24-foot, so the village committee, doing the sound standard is gotta be.
John, do you want me a second? I'm gonna, you just sent me an email, I'm gonna go upstairs. and-
No, I haven't, I'm putting it on a thumb drive. I gotta earn my new nameplate, you know?
I'll put something in the budget to get an actual.
Was there a score before you came in?
I came from another meeting.
They not started yet?
Yankees aren't
One
playing.
batter when I came in, and he was out.
Can you, on the thumb drive, which one did you say that
The last two right
The
there.
last two, so.
You want-
that's
you want me to
their
open
plan.
these?
Yeah, that's their plan.
The other ones are pictures of my kids.
This
John,
might be Q2, but not a.
bottom of the second, 1-0 Dodgers.
We were gonna try to get a split screen. I wasn't very respectful to the applicant.
Well, thank you for scheduling this tonight. We appreciate the opportunity to come and get some of the technical data squared away so that we don't have to keep the rest of the public listening to us. Paul Bertay is going to run through some of the drawings that he submitted. He was asked to submit these color-coded drawings as well as part of it that have been submitted. And he'll run through some of the essential finalizations, I'd like to hope, of the plan, so that we can start tucking this in.
Well, I can already share, it's an moment, right? I think the color diagram make a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just cleaning up a little bit to show to show where the areas are. And I can, do you have all of them up on the thumb drive or just this one?
Just the two sheets.
Just the two sheets, okay. So, just to take you through this, and you guys have all been out there, I'm assuming, at some point or another, so what I'm saying is not new, but the existing traveled way kind of meanders through here.
I can go to a Google Earth image if you prefer, that I have queued up.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
How come escape doesn't get me out of
Go
this?
to the top. You should be able to,
I think we just hover the mouse, John, at the, I think at the top or the bottom.
it taller,
Just
yeah.
this.
There you go.
There you go to the bottom. It'll open up the main, should open up the main choices.
It wanted to.
There you go.
Okay.
And if you want, John, you can hit that, see that little arrow there at the upper left? You can close
That'll close that so you see nothing but picture.
Close that side window there.
Where?
On the left, by the, right, that little arrow pointing to the left. Nope.
I lost
No,
the
just
cursor.
Pointing in.
Oh, there it is. This arrow.
Yep.
Yep, that should bring that down.
Perfect.
There you go.
Okay.
I knew it all the time.
And you might be able
And
to
then
even
no
move it
fence
around by
between
holding
the
it down and moving it, but
Yeah, can we slide it up this way, because we'll just start up right here?
Should I go now?
That's perfect. So, North Water Street, this is where we have the full right-of-way, and then it kind of gets fuzzy and hazy at this point. I'm just gonna kind of speak frankly. We have an opportunity here to clean this mess up with this application. And
you're referring to
whatever-
lot 6?
Lot 6, yeah, and the right of
and
way
the whole
for
issue
getting
there.
into North Water Street. Village owns it, there's nothing that I can see that would stop the village from creating a full right of way for this access to this roadway. Compliant road, 24-foot sidewalk, going to a nice facility that might be used. I know that's not for conversation for tonight, but at least I'm not quite sure, having gone through this for the last 6 months with you, as new here, why are we not just talking about mapping this and cleaning it up, and instead of going back and forth in terms of who has easement, who has access? It's a nice clean path to get to Santucci's before you get to Santucci's property.
Paul, I'm sorry, can I think this is a good time to just mention the fact with respect to that first part. And it's something that we had, when John and I met with Mr. Stout, we went over and we wanted to really clarify, and I think it's important to point this out because it's also an important part of the application and the whole land use process and development down by the waterfront. This area where it's more or less existing conditions actually, even though it's not mapped out and not properly shown on the maps and goes partly on the Varian property. But you have this lot 6. And there was some confusion in the past, and I think that Mr. Starr appreciated the fact that we made it very clear in our last meeting, we are not, and I'll repeat again, the applicant is not asking for any taking from the village. We're not asking them to give us any rights of way, nothing that is a giving to our applicant. What we're offering, what we have always offered, and maybe it hadn't been clear enough, but we've tried to make it crystal clear now, as part of the benefit, the overall package of benefits to the village with respect to this, we're offering to clean up this mess that exists down here. There may even be some environmental issues, but it'll be a perfect spot for this to become a parking lot to access and accommodate Snowden Park. Any of you, as I live in this town, know if you go down here, it's nothing but parking along the street for people using the park, heavily parked. This would also provide parking for people who want to access this way on foot to the waterfront, who want to come over towards the marina and towards the boathouse and other riverfront facilities by foot. It would be another place to park. In addition to that, however, it would provide a required and code-compliant roadway for the village for safety, health, when combined with what else you're going to hear that we're proposing for the village. At no expense to the taxpayers, it will clear up a long existing mess down there, and frankly one that now we've seen in the last storm, Hurricane Sandy, and which prompted the change in the laws here in the village and the flood elevations, and requiring that any access be no more than 2 feet underwater for emergency vehicle tires. Right now, it's frankly a danger to those that work and live down this street. We're offering to clear that up to the village at no cost to the village, while offering a benefit to residents in conjunction with the letter and spirit of the waterfront development zoning codes.
So, not to interrupt, David, but I just
want to, because there was some...
But I think we're all gonna warm up to that idea. But, and Brian, you were, Paul, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
You were sharing the notion, I don't understand how this happened, well, because it doesn't happen here, right? The mechanics of that first step.
Yeah.
To allow us to get to good planning solutions, the mechanics of that first step don't happen here. They happen.
It can start here.
Well, and it has started.
And it was
right?
expressed
but it
to
feels
us.
like to us there would have been the next step.
Well, I don't want to speak for you, Jim, but maybe you can reiterate. It was expressed to us at the meeting, and I think it was appreciated, a clarification as to what we actually were proposing with respect to that, and with respect to how it may be viewed by the village board and acted upon by the village board. But we just wanted to make it clear, because there had been in the past some misconceptions. We weren't asking to take any property,
But
be
the
given any property.
misconceptions were where? In this board or somewhere else?
No, I think even within the board, and I don't know, I'm not saying where they came from, I'm just saying that we wanted to make it clear that we're not looking for a giving or a taking, we're looking to do nothing but offer a huge benefit to the village.
And I think we're all clear on that.
Okay,
I think
thought I would...
and I'm not trying to defer this dialogue, I'm just suggesting, before it can be introduced as a sound and good planning solution, something else has gotta happen. Am I right?
Well, I think, John, when we met with
I think
Jim,
they're all coordinate tracks.
Part of the origin of this was a couple of months ago when somebody on the village side, and I don't even recall who now, brought up the notion that we were somehow asking for land.
It's been in the record.
So A, we wanted to make it crystal clear, and we did when we met with Jim and Steve from your office. That was the farthest thing from our mind,
Right.
number one. And number two, we had the discussion, I think to your point, with Jim, that that piece of it has to go before the village board itself, and indeed Jim said, I may have to, he would, express to you guys and to the village board that,
What our
so we
intentions
understand
were.
that, we understand that.
So let me,
But I'm listening to,
since I'm being
at least
involved here.
a sense of frustration, and I'm thinking, well, okay, we've heard the notion, now you've got to go do something about it.
No, it's not a frustration, we just wanted to
Okay.
make sure, because there was clearly a misunderstanding at one point, we just wanted to put it to rest, that's all.
So, maybe I shouldn't reopen the understanding. Maybe I should just go to there was, I've said before, there was a resolution of the village board that's in front of me from May 2007. There was a request to the village board that led to that resolution. That was what it was. It's ascertainable. It's in writing. But let's agree not to debate that. but
Right, we
just to say that this is, the suggestion is, there is a piece of village land. My understanding is we call it 7 Water Street or subdivision lot 6, I guess, right? And from the beginning, there has been a request that somehow a part of that land, it's been talked about over the years since I've been involved as 10 feet, be used to widen the roadway here, because there's a 20-foot easement here and 10 more feet would make it 30 feet. That notion has been on the table since at least this board resolution of May of 2000. So, and I think what John is saying is, okay.
My understanding is, however, if you guys.
No, let me finish.
I'm sorry, I thought you'd
Since you
stop.
invoked me, for that to happen, whether it's the village doing it, whether it's an easement, whatever the legal mechanism would be, there needs to be action of the village board. That, in my opinion, has been the case and understood by everybody, from the beginning. And at some point, you're gonna have to get back to the village board and talk to them about it.
And
I don't
yeah.
think I said that I would be going to talk to them about it, but we would.
Well, I thought you said you would bring
we
back
would
our
talk about a
sentiments to them.
process
Yeah.
which would involve that.
And just so that we're clear, we're not talking about an easement, we're talking about actually improving what is already
Whatever
public
the
property.
mechanics
Yeah,
are,
yes.
and the details
Understood.
of those, I think we, as the planning board, it's fair to say we recognize how that
Okay.
enhances,
And the river is right
cleans
here.
up, to borrow a term here tonight, makes it code compliant, on down the list. We recognize how that
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because.
lends itself
you
to
know,
your site plan.
And also in terms of safety, you know what, at the risk of being dramatic, and I know that attorneys are never dramatic, but it may actually even save some lives someday in a way that doesn't cause people to second guess, well, geez, why didn't the village do that? So we'd love to be able to do that for you.
Nobody's disputing.
Okay.
The potential goodness there. We're just, I think
Okay.
our frustration is we recognize that there is a basket of potential goodness, but that basket doesn't belong to us, as best as I know. Us.
Well, insofar as it's part of our application, however, it's before you, even though some other steps are involved in bringing that to fruition.
Okay, so now we move.
And if I might just, Nick Stellatus with Plateau Associates, just to follow up on what Mr. Stout has said just now, to clear it up, because I misunderstood what he was saying. Physically, the road is the dimension it needs to be.
Well, that's what it exists today, in
It's
reality.
about 30 feet right now. The road physically does not align with the
map.
legal description that is on the books. And what we have been suggesting, not that we want it granted, we have suggested to the village from day one that the village really should address its misalignment. This is the village's issue, and we have been trying to present that, and it constantly comes back as, well, you need 10 more feet. The feet are there, the physicality of the road surface exists. It is the legal description which is in error. The legal description, which as Mr. Stott well knows, also has the pumping station in the middle of the legally described road. Now, we know the pumping station is not in a physical road, it's in a legally described road. So the village has an obligation, certainly to the community, to correct what it knows is in error.
Well,
The road does
So
not
I'm not,
align.
So
gonna-
we've-
you know what, I think we're going down a black hole here that we don't need to, till we
Right.
understand
Yeah,
this
let's
road. But I just don't want by silence to say I agree with errors and black, and all
Right.
that stuff and where the road is. I think we're gonna get nowhere if we start with we've said what we've said, we've also said what our positions are. I would continue to discuss, you know,
Right.
the physical
Let-
road. We all understand
I
the
think-
village board has to do something if you're gonna get 10 feet, if 10 feet of that property is gonna be.
Agree. And can we, if we can try to keep this on the plan, driving in the planning lane,
Mhm.
recognizing that whatever milestone, the planning lane has influence from some other mechanism, we could talk about that.
And-
So,
And to your point, I think we agree, so we should leave Lot 6 and start with the beginning of the Santucci property where our obligation and responsibility for the road currently exists, and that, you know, Paul has prepared
Which I think is where
extensive
Paul was
plans.
headed anyhow.
Yeah,
So I,
so let's
so I
move
have
there
to
rather
say,
than
so I
delay.
have to say that I don't agree that the applicant's obligation and responsibility for the road begins only at the Santucci property.
Fair enough.
right.
Okay.
Wait, would you clear something up for me? You're not interested in buying a piece of Lot 6?
Absolutely not.
No,
Thank you,
no.
that's all, okay.
Okay.
Yes,
One more
question.
question.
Yes.
Is there a path forward if this is not in contention for this plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's why I suggested, let's move to the next segment,
Yep, thank
since, you know, on the one hand, we can't not discuss it and discuss it, so let's
Sure.
move on to the next part.
Thank you.
So
No.
we,
What is it you want to do with Santucci? You want to buy a piece of his land? Do you want to take a piece of his land?
If I may give you the history, over 10 years ago, we negotiated with the Santucci's and obtained the right to have a 30-foot wide easement across their property, to have the right to develop a legally compliant roadway, to provide safe and direct access to our property, which is immediately to the north of the Santucci.
And you're happy with that now? Or you want to do something else?
No, that's what we've been trying to present, is,
We have no interest
Our
in buying the
plan.
Santucci property.
No,
and
no.
that was never on the
But
table.
the piece that you negotiated, whatever,
Well,
That has been
may I
created.
try to answer where I think Barbara's going?
Uh-huh.
The question is, Barbara, that the plan width of what was negotiated is not changing.
no.
Where the surface is in that plan width that was negotiated, how many years ago?
2004.
About 10.
13 years ago.
Is now being raised approximately how much? Proposed to be raised
up to 3 feet.
up to 3 feet. So
They're
now
going to
that,
raise it?
it's now being
part of our
proposed to be
construction.
raised 3 feet. So now that introduces collateral issues beyond the planned easement that have to be technically addressed.
Yeah, because the water,
Right.
okay.
Okay.
I got it. Thank you.
Right. So the plan before you has that 30-foot easement mapped over the approximate traveled way right now. Now, that's very marginal to decipher in many of the cases where the traveled way is, because the parking area blends in with the road and the trucks come flying by and it's,
Can you zoom that picture that's
Sure.
up there, so we can, you know, get a feeling for how it's kind of a little bit of a paved mishmash down there with no designation? Yeah, it's just like all over the place, kind of packed and,
How far, you want me to back up?
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's back
that's-
up,
yeah.
there you go, a little
Yeah.
further back. Yep.
Yeah, that's good.
thank you.
Good.
go
And that's a
I'm
big
trying.
rock.
That's a little bit more.
surgery.
All right.
A little
so-
more?
A little bit, if you could.
I can tell you.
There you go, you got
There
it.
you go, you got it, yeah.
You got it.
Whoop.
Oh, too much.
Okay. So the road comes in, this is where the radius is, we're coming down. This is now within the Santucci property. This is the traveled way, and this is the location of the current application, the position of the road in the current application, where it's mapped within that traveled way, 30 feet, 24-foot sidewalk, 24-foot roadway, 5-foot sidewalk and curbs. The grade change starts to happen somewhere around here, where this dips down to elevation about 5.2 in here, 4.9 is the low spot. And I gotta get to elevation 8. Okay, so a little bit, 3 feet plus or minus. So what that does is creates an access, now what was a bifurcated property with a roadway in between now becomes 2 separate pieces because now you've got an elevated roadway going through a property. Not
By
ideal.
bifurcated, you mean the Santucci, it lives on both sides of the
It lives on both sides.
Bisected.
Right, whatever the,
Understood, understood.
So, not ideal, however, the court order says that we have the right to construct a 30-foot wide roadway through the Santucci property to, through also Castle Plumbing, which a portion of the road is on the applicant's property as well, but before we get to the property owned by Plateau. So as we're coming along here, at this point here is the worst case scenario where we're having to raise it just over 3 feet. Right now, trucks, this is a garage, half of this building is like a warehouse facility for the use of the Santucci's. And if I might note that Jay Hernandez and Washington Hernandez are here tonight on behalf of the Santucci's. We have been working with, as we've discussed, the plan through that property so that it's amenable to both, so that we can do our job and the Santucci's are complying with their stipulation set up for their stipulation, I guess, right? For the with the Okay. So we're coming through here. We have access going into this building here, so trucks generally coming in, pulling off the traveled way here. This is all open, so people backing up, backing in. One of the things we're trying to prove is, do we have turning access? But right now, it's a free-for-all. It's cars kind of coming in, backing out into the traveled way. Actually defining that road, even at the higher elevation, sort of starts to minimize the haphazard traveled path and really the dangerous situation that's out there now with those tractor trailers passing.
Well, there's no demarcation right now.
There's no demarcation.
It's just,
right. So it's just
haphazard
kind of,
asphalt.
Yeah, right. So the plan to maintain the traveled way at the higher elevation, as shown in the application that we have before you guys, is to provide a driveway into this, to provide vehicular access to this door, starting from here, so that we're maintaining a reasonable slope to go down. This would be cut off to a portion, so that, because you're not going to be able to access that from the elevated roadway, there'll be a driveway coming in. In this portion here, we originally had on your plans that you see an access from here straight in here. However, reviewing the code, we originally kept the 14% max grade, but for commercial properties, it's got to be down to 6. So we're pulling that a little bit further here, with the driveway access to this portion of Santucci's property. Coming in here, pulling off the road to the right, and then driving in at that lower elevation. This whole roadway will be retained. These spots are deep, so we don't lose the parking count as shown on the Santucci property, but we do introduce 2 to 3 foot high wall for this extent, and for the extent coming from here as well.
So 2 questions so far. At one point, there was some initial dialogue about the access point ramps being in the neighborhood of 14%.
Correct.
Is that still true?
It would be true if we maintained it here, but we're able to modify that and bring that access point to here, where we are maintaining a code.
Okay.
Paul, is that on a plan that we have?
No,
That change?
no. This was
So we don't have that.
I met with Mr. Smelly, and that was one of his comments that he brought to our attention. That was one of the changes that we would do to present this configuration.
Now, and so part of in various versions of the plan and the narrative and the dialogue, you talked about a sidewalk.
Yes.
And so where do you stand on that?
We would run the sidewalk along the continuous on the west side,
Mhm.
traveling along, traveled way, curb cuts, depressed curb, where those new access points would be.
And this may be leaping way forward, but at 36 inches, a sidewalk above an adjacent surface would have to have a hand.
Yes.
Right,
And a
okay.
guide rail, I mean, we would be putting a guide rail along this.
Along the traffic side and a handrail on the,
And there's lighting and planting and other things contemplated as
Drainage, a
well.
whole host of things that would go along with that.
You wouldn't even recognize it down there anymore.
okay, continue, please.
So if we want to just continue past here, and I want to come back to this.
Right.
But let's just continue going along here. Now, again, this is all, there's no demarcation, although it's shaded on Google Earth. It's all just,
I shaded that in before you.
oh, awesome.
John's kind of cheating a little bit.
This is a very shallow loading dock, but at this point, we're just at about elevation 8, which is the hard number that we're holding to comply with the access elevation for fire, for the village's fire chief, which.
I'm sorry, there's one other question I had, I
Yes.
forgot. Aren't there pedestrian doors on the east side?
There
of
are.
this?
There are 2 pedestrian doors on this side.
I've sadly had to enter one of those doors.
And there's parking here. And the way to address these spaces, which we talked about at Mr. Smelly's office, was by raising this to maintain these parking spaces, which are shown on a site plan. We would just continue the wall, propose to continue the wall on the Santucci property around those parking spaces, and they would be at grade like they are now, to continue to make sure that those spaces still exist.
Right, and then pedestrian access can be introduced on the north side?
Or just the sidewalk would be depressed, like in industrial areas where that sidewalk is.
And have steps down to those doors?
And have steps down to the doors.
It would be ramped, there would be steps. You'd have a slope
Yeah.
down, like a handicap.
Well, no, I mean, I understand how,
Yeah.
the concept, but it's tough to know if you're gonna have the width between the building and the curb to have a sidewalk, and then an indentation on almost an areaway down to those doors. And I don't wanna get bogged down in that kind of stuff. Just that there's, so if we start putting interesting nuggets on that's gonna be an interesting problem to solve.
All of these interesting problems around this can all be engineered.
No, I've never, there's
Right.
no question about it.
Right.
What is the sum total of the experience though, and that's where we're headed ultimately,
Yeah,
right?
it's not ideal.
There's no doubt all of this can be incrementally
Right.
engineered and solved. What does it total up to?
Right. Well, I say not ideal, but it does provide an access road that is at the proper elevation so that, there's no one here, but there's trucks going back and forth here quite frequently.
Tractor trailers.
Big ones,
Yeah.
fast.
I can interject my opinion, which doesn't hold any engineering weight, but I think at the end of the day, the sum total, regardless of how it's accomplished, is something logarithmically better than what exists presently at the sites.
And I don't think we're at the point of either acknowledging that, accepting that, agreeing to that, or denying that. I'm saying that anything's an improvement over this.
That
And
was
so
the
that's
base,
bar
that was the
we're
base
setting
that I
for the
started at, John.
planning
I started there.
standard.
Yes.
We're already chasing our tails.
No place to go but up.
I'd like to break to the alternative before we go further. If that's-
Okay, go ahead.
If that's okay. So, yes, everything can be engineered, walls, radius, we can meet grade. But we could, whatever the court's saying that we have the right to do that, great, we can build the walls and add the pavement. But in the last couple of weeks, we've been speaking with the representatives of Santucci, who are sitting with us tonight, to realign this road along the railroad and relocate this building onto what would be the east side of the of the property. You would now not have two separate sides of a private property. You'd have a road that would not require retaining walls and driveway ramps to maintain the use of the existing property. And we've come up with a site plan that Mr. Hernandez is, I mean, although not finalized, we have a high level of comfort that this is an alternative that is feasible, both in engineering, but in also concept with the owner.
Is that an image we had?
No,
Oh, okay.
No.
that's not on the thumb drive, right? That, what you talking about now, Paul?
You proposed.
What's that?
No, unless you sent it to Judge Chamel's office, so then
This was a work in progress.
This is really a work in
Discussions.
progress. We've talked about it before, but
Can you can I give you a hand and kind of move that around?
Thank
Paul, the back leg is on something, I think.
So, as an alternative to, and it's hard to see, but there's, the existing right-of-way kind of travels here and meanders back, and you can kind of follow it where it was on the Google Earth. We're talking about extending the tangent point here, pushing this radius further down so that we're not turning here, we're turning a little bit, we're turning further towards the railroad property, and now having a straight run all the way to Castle Pond. At the elevations that are required for the, for elevation 8, so that we're in the flood, we're outside of, we're able to pass emergency vehicles through the floodplain. And now you have a property that had two halves, and we have it as one parcel on the east side of the road. We're showing the existing building here, which is approximately 80 by 30. Coordination with the owner's representative, Mr. Hernandez, citing that building zoning in a zoning compliant fashion, meaning setbacks on the east side of the road, with the intention of either, creating a plan that would not require walls.
And from a land design perspective, I think it's fairly clear that it would have the added benefit of enhancing the property values of the Santucci property, not to be bisected by the current roadway that exists and have a unified piece of property.
And the village gets much closer to a conventional road that would be.
And so does your project.
Yep.
Yes.
And where would that be with regard to the Metro North right of way?
Adjacent to it.
But not encroaching?
Not encroaching.
Not encroaching.
And you've talked about that plan with Metro North?
Not yet. First was with private property owners, and then we rotate.
And where, on Google Earth, where would that building be located? Where would you relocate that building?
I think the ultimate location, if indeed the Santucci's elect to rebuild that building, would really be up to them. This would be a matter where they would agree to take the building down to allow for the road to be relocated in that location. Whatever else they may elect to do on their property would be their obligation. We don't have any further rights other than the ability to come onto their property, to build a legally compliant 30-foot wide roadway, drives, sidewalk, and curbs, and then exit their property and then allow the road to continue on as a safe road option for pedestrians and vehicular traffic, which currently does not exist. Anything else that goes on the Santucci property, that's their business. We have no input, we have no say, we have no control.
And it would be reflected on a site plan.
They would obviously submit an amended site plan.
So Mark, I do want to say that I think that it's certainly a question the board has the right to delve into, because to execute what we're talking about here, there's going to have to be what's going to be a related site plan change for the Santucci property. So it's a question that.
Yeah, I believe that, and they understand that, that's
needs to
something they've
get
been working on.
It needs-
Mark
okay.
and Stuart also, maybe you could help me, because I'm not aware of it, but I'd like to know now if you're particularly aware of it. Since it's not going to encroach onto the Metro North right away, I'm not aware of any required distance setback from the Metro North right away.
No, but you gotta touch base with them.
Yeah, no, I understand, but I just want to make sure we don't have any impediments there on the location.
Well, and this predates, your assignment. Metro North had been connected, contacted early on. So the current activity going on within the Plateau property has been fully reviewed and vetted by Metro North. There would be, of course, the additional discussions that would occur purely on the Santucci property. So not to make it seem like the Metro North has not been spoken to, they have, they've submitted their questions, they've been resolved, and we're proceeding on that basis.
You've got new people there, though, so I would just follow up.
And understood, no, it has to be
By the way,
connected because
Can I
of
just
the-
ask, and I know this has, and I apologize, the road itself, whose road is it gonna be?
It will continue to be a public street.
Well, wait a minute, that's not, but that's not a public street.
It's not a public.
According to the highway department, it is.
No, it's not. That's not on the DOT list. The DOT list, North Water Street does not go there.
Well, I don't know.
No, but it's important.
And I want you to understand, because I don't want to get bogged down in this, but what we had given, and I think that, it has been shown, and I'm not sure that it's so germane for exactly what happens, but the court has held that it is in fact a public street since the 40s. And in fact.
I'm merely asking because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
if you're asking the village of Austin
Yeah.
to maintain that road, do snow plowing, paving and everything, you gotta let me know that now.
I understand, but
Not
does the village of Austin do that now? Do
No.
they plow down there? Who plows?
They don't.
Okay, because
They do pick up
I want to
trash.
say that I do not agree
I don't-
that any court has determined that the part of this roadway that's on the Santucci property, the Castle Plumbing property and so forth, is a dedicated village public road.
I submitted
do
the.
not agree with that.
But I did submit the decision to you from the Supreme Court that actually talked about those extensions and said they were in fact a public street by virtue of deeds to the president of the Village of Ossining in the 1940s. And we have a title company that has said, in fact, that the Department of Highways for the Village of Ossining, with respect to the section, block, and lot that's referable to their property location, that portion of North Water Street in front of it is reported as a public street. And the court went on to cite also, again, deeds from the 1940s to the Village of Ossining.
I'm just raising it now.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying that I have submitted that.
There are 4 people here who are volunteering their time, and there's some.
I didn't want to hijack your time, so I
Yeah, thank you.
apologize.
And there's some people over here who are not volunteering their time. No matter
So,
what
I mean, we're
team you're
spending
in.
a lot of time on the roadway, which, granted, it's significant. I mean, is also part of what we want to do tonight, try to get to the point where we're at a final DEIS? Is that kind of?
Yes, but we were told this is a threshold
I think
issue to
so.
address tonight.
I think so. We had an agenda, a suggested agenda, most of which is about the roadway. And then also to talk about what a path forward is for an EIS.
I apologize
Toward the
to
end,
you
but
for
that's
not
at the-
following that.
No, that's at the very, we're following the agenda.
We're following along.
Okay.
The agenda is really almost all about the roadway. And with a little bit at the end about discussing the approval process going forward. But it's
Right.
mostly about the physical and legal side of the roadway.
So beyond this big reveal, are there any other big reveals coming
That's it.
on the flip?
That's it.
Okay.
It's just, because anything past here, we're not proposing to change the reconfiguration of the roadway around Castle Plumbing. Even though the water line does pass directly under this building. The intention is to widen the roadway into the Plateau Associates parcel, and extending, and I know there was a discussion, Jim, were we talking about the 20-foot wide easement in Castle Plumbing parcel? Any of the improvements to that widening would be within the Plateau Associates property and not extend outside of that of what might be the existing 20-foot easement through that.
And so just so I can understand, to do my analysis, my understanding when we spoke in our own session was that to do the widening that's necessary to create the road in this area, you have the Castle Plumbing easement that you have. We talk about the legalities of that. What you're gonna do is you're gonna cut into the hill.
Cut into the.
Yes, we discussed that with Mr. Schmelly, right?
And that will create a widening. But you also told me, and it may have changed, that what you were gonna do was going to require some regrading on the Castle Plumbing property. Is that not the case?
Yes, there is some minor regrading in this Castle Plumbing property, where we're going from an elevation of between 8 and 9. I don't have the specifics here, but at this point, at this corner, property corner, we're at about elevation. So we're talking about feathering this pavement.
Right, so
maintaining access as.
And this has
is.
been reviewed with Castle Plumbing.
So that's what I think you need to get to for the board. You're telling the board that you're going to go outside the Castle Plumbing easement and do some work on the Castle Plumbing property. You need to talk to the
Yes.
board about that.
Okay.
And you're not
Explain to
going
them what's
west.
happening here.
No.
Maybe you'll tell them about your meeting with Castle Plumbing. They were very relieved to find out that the village wasn't condemning their property by eminent domain, but,
So as
might
long
not
as
be a
we're
bad idea.
in this segment of road, and so across from Castle Plumbing,
Mhm.
there is a significant rock cut.
Rock face.
And not drilling into that now, here and now. But that's gonna be, that's a significant point of interest for the planning board, I think. Not only in terms of what the order of magnitude is, but what the aesthetic results are gonna be. And I think that, and it ultimately, it won't be just this board. There are gonna be stakeholders in the Hudson Valley that are gonna be interested in what you're doing on that rock face.
Right.
And so my only notion, is that grading it uniformly in a way that is kind of like an interstate highway would cut. I'm thinking you may wanna think about how you're gonna do that.
I don't know, I can't say definitively that I'm gonna have a rock face like I do now when I cut it back
Right.
15 feet. My assumption is that we will have that condition. So whatever it looks like now, that rock face will be pushed to further into the hill where it's not gonna be graded at a 2-on-1 slope.
Right, it's not gonna be this uniform slope, there's gonna be this natural
It's-
cleft.
It's most likely going to be that.
Okay.
And that was something that we spoke about also, that on the plans, and it would be then further discussed in the language of the EIS, that an area here, and I can show what that area would be of rock face versus the full regrading into this plateau.
Okay.
And, you know, in terms of interest of the board in this location, having stood out there for the last couple of times, and these tractor trailers whipping around this should happen now.
Okay.
We shouldn't be talking about the people from the Hudson River, about what they're gonna see. This building gets clipped because the trucks are so close.
Well, I'll let you share that when those people come.
Okay.
You can
I'll
navigate.
gladly. I'd like to have them stand
You
there.
personally navigate your
I'm used to them.
Well, would you,
But I mean, in all fairness, right, they have standing in their stakeholders and their interest and I know you're not trying to dismiss
I'm
the
not.
sincerity and noble cause that they're addressing, but
Sure.
you got that.
I think you need to walk through the Castle Plumbing piece, the way you walked through the Santucci piece for the board.
Okay.
Exactly what's happening, is their access going to be changed? What are you doing on their property outside the easement area? This is what we're here for.
Okay, so just to give you some ideas, our road travels between elevation 8 and elevation 9 to maintain that and provide positive drainage into inlets. The profile will change. After talking with Mr. Smelly, we might change how we get up to those highs and low points. But let's just take some elevations right now from the survey. 8.2 in this corner, like 8.1 in this corner here. Go down to elevation 7, 6.7, and I'm going down to 5.6. I'm going down further where we're at that full 3 foot of fill. So from here to here, we go from nothing to, at this point here, to 1.3 feet of elevation difference between the road and the existing.
When you say nothing, you mean from existing?
Existing.
Right.
So here, nothing has changed. At this point here, this is elevation 7, our road's up at elevation 8. A 1 foot grade change here. Engineering wise, we're showing a driveway, a single curb cut versus the broad curb cut here, just from a, I guess, a safety perspective.
Right.
But it could be continued as a, up to this point. This area here could be continued as a drop curb where there would be no changes
Right.
to.
Any number of solutions there. I would tend to defer to the solution that's not only compliant grade-wise, but aesthetically appealing, right?
Sure.
I mean, I think that's gonna drive our focus in instances like that.
And something else that we discussed, right now, as you mentioned, at both A&P and Castle Plumbing, you have an undefined entry, cars are backing in and out along that entire frontage. With this plan, you'll at least have defined entry points. It doesn't eliminate the vehicles having to back out.
Right.
Maybe not so much at Castle Plumbing, but certainly with the A&P collision, not the alternative plan, but in the original plan, you just don't have the available space for vehicle to pull in and actually turn around and pull head out onto the road. So there'll still be a situation where vehicles have to back out onto this
Right.
road to get out.
You concur with that?
Yes.
Okay. How, just, again, not to drill down into details here, but, so you're creating a retaining wall on the west side of your road bed against the existing Castle Plumbing building?
No, we don't need to, the elevation here, we're at grade.
By the time you reach that corner?
It's already at
Then I
elevation.
misunderstood you,
Yeah.
okay.
We're at elevation 8 here, we're at elevation 9 here, 9.5. We don't have a grade change issue from the proposed elevation of the new road and the adjacent property at Castle Plumbing.
And the
It happens-
sidewalk
it happens
is
here.
adjacent to the building there?
Yeah, we're close to it in this corner here.
Okay.
Just by nature, we have a little bit more room here, but this is elevation 9.5. There are no grade changes at this point. We kept our profile about
Right.
existing here and raised it from there on.
So Paul, just to understand, to be consistent with what I understood, again, for the legal analysis, I recollect, unless I misunderstood, that you told me this side of the building, I think that's south, right? South of the building, right where you are, you can leave it there.
Okay.
That there would be some grade change, but you wouldn't need a retaining wall, you could kind of roll it down just with what I'll call a slight hill down into the castle property.
Yeah, 1%. We have it at 1%.
Okay, so you will be raising the grade of the road to some extent there,
Yes.
but not to the extent that you, in your opinion, that you need a retaining wall, but to the extent that you will have to grade down
That is
differently
correct.
from today.
That is correct.
Okay, I just wanted the board.
And we showed that on the colored plan. I think this hatch area was actually a color, which is what we were proposing as modification outside of the 30-foot easement.
So where do you change
But I don't think anything that's not normal and incidental with roadway construction, because there's no retaining wall, there is no ramps. I mean, it's gonna be rare not to have some level
I
of
agree.
grading on the side of a roadway. It just doesn't happen.
But for example, in this instance, now you're altering the stormwater drainage pattern toward, and in this instance, towards the building, towards their,
Towards the road.
well, towards Castle Plumbing's, their south wall. So you've got,
Curb and gutter, I mean,
you're gonna have some drainage work
We
on
do.
that side
the whole,
too.
this whole,
That whole stretch, and we've
Stretch
talked
needs
about
to
it,
be-
that
Okay.
road is essentially gonna end up becoming a dam for all the properties on
Like a
the
causeway.
east side of that.
Right.
So there'll be some kind of culvert crossings or something needs to be designed to let that water flow back. If you can envision, runoff coming down those higher elevations towards
I hadn't
Santucci,
even gotten to that.
they'll get trapped in
Right.
there. So there's gonna have to be provisions made.
and they're trapped there now. because you've got the railroad at a higher elevation. So that it already is a basin. And the only, there's a catch basin here which has access to the river, and then there's a larger culvert on the Plateau Associates property, which that would be
So
logical.
You mentioned some lead standard, pursuing some lead standards on this project. And this realignment of this roadway presents lots of opportunities to pursue those before you even get to the building. Are you moving toward that, or is that gonna be part of this dialogue, or?
I don't think it needs to be part of this dialogue. The actual execution of the lead certification process will be taken up when we're ready to go through construction. Because there are many different options that have nothing to do with the site plan approval.
I didn't say that. I asked
I
you,
understand.
you
We have-
brought up the lead.
We have not itemized.
And I asked if you were utilizing any of those here.
And
in the
we
road.
have not itemized any specific lead item to say, here's what we will or what we're doing. That will come in due course.
Okay.
And John, this is a very early design.
Well, I
as
understand,
well.
so there's another follow-up question to the lead aspect is, and maybe I'm mistaken. Based on my experience, a project is registered with LEED as it begins the schematic design, often before, as it enters the conceptual design. Because you build the framework of your LEED pursuit into the design as you develop it. And so I looked for this project on the registry.
We have not registered
And it wasn't there.
We have
Okay.
not.
So how does, just give me a quick snapshot of where that's headed.
Quite honestly, once the board approves our application and we're ready to start bringing on the different teams, the contractors, et cetera, at that point in time, we will finalize our selection of the lead components that will be incorporated into the program.
Okay.
I mean, there are many that are gonna be there, like the green roof, not impacting virgin land. Again, a lot of our design was intended to allow us to retain that 1.5 acres of undisturbed land in the back of the property.
No, I get it.
That connects to the.
And I understand.
And reusing and maintaining as small a footprint as possible. So there are very significant aspects that we already have embedded, but some of the other details that you're looking for example, the amount of energy that will generate through the anticipated photovoltaic systems.
Right.
We don't know that.
But the overarching
Mhm.
concept
Mhm.
of LEED is not to back your building into compliance checklist, is to integrate the LEED initiatives into the design as it's developed.
We have done that. We've retained the property, we've minimized its footprint, we've contained the parking underneath the building. We've done a lot of that, Mr. Fry.
But that was from day one.
That was from day
Long
one.
before the
We-
LEED
and
discussion was.
We actually have.
Long
been-
before you brought up the LEED.
We have been touting the eco-friendly nature of our development from the very beginning. It doesn't seem to have made much impact, but we have been touting that, and we will continue to pursue that.
I'm sorry, much
Yes.
impact in what regard?
The fact that we are retaining the green area, if you may recall, it was suggested to us that we want to impact that green area and move the building even further back, which would not have achieved anything tangible and would have in fact caused a problem or reduced our ability to earn points because we've retained the existing property.
Well, I disagree with the reduced your, just almost as a matter of fact. But anyway,
I
we're
would
not gonna
disagree
talk
with the matter of
Here, I
fact.
wanna come back to the road.
Certainly.
And so I've asked the question, here's a, how long is this road?
2,000 feet.
Here's a 2,000-foot linear opportunity to embrace sustainable components.
And what would you see as the element that we can introduce?
That was gonna be my next question, because I'm not an engineer, so
I think there's a lot of opportunities in terms of stormwater management, first and foremost, right? In terms of
Yeah. I don't, I'm.
That
I
pretty
will-
much sums it up
I'm
there,
gonna-
right
I'm
there.
gonna refrain
I
because-
hate to take away from visual cues, but I would suggest that.
I'll
sums it up.
refrain because I don't have lead experience, but I
Let's
know
just
I'm
leave it
in,
this
I'm in the
way.
floodplain,
It's
and I know
It's a
I'm.
2,000 linear foot opportunity. I'll leave it up to you guys.
It's
to
food
go.
for thought.
Sure.
You know, and I want to say, because I know you don't want to be here all night, but we have to, we're in a process that we have to go through it. But I kind of want to just interject a general statement here, and I know at times that, you know, I can be a little blunt, but I only know kind of one way, and I know that this has been going on for over 10 years, and at a certain point in time, you get a little exhaustion, and, you know, you can have a little paralysis by analysis, but we can probably sit here for another 10 years and find legal and engineering impediments to this project, if we want to, if we want to do that, we can.
No,
But 10 years, but I'm saying, but 10 years from now, what'll happen is nothing will change. I know that change is always resistant, and you'll still have a piece of land that looks like a part of the Bridgeport Commercial District where you'd expect to find a gentleman's club at the end, not something that is really a pearl of the north side of Ossining on the river. And I think that,
I think that's an unfair leap to the fringe.
well, yeah, but look at the,
Yeah, okay,
we see the place.
We don't need to be leaping and
Okay.
preaching to the fringe.
But I think that we
That's
need,
not
I think that
really
we really need to find a way to get a beautiful project developed
Well,
here.
that's what we all volunteer our time for.
I know that, and
Month
I
in and
appreciate it.
month out.
Yeah.
I think you need a phrase in your presentation somewhere that would say, we will be prepared for the unknown. There's a lot of unknowns down there.
Absolutely, there are.
Good observation.
Again,
Yes.
just because of what I have, my job, could you say whether, you started to say that you were in discussions with Castle, because it sounds.
No, Paul was in discussions with Castle, I haven't talked to him.
Okay, because it sounds like there's gonna be construction on the Castle Plumbing property, and so.
That's correct.
So are you gonna be talking to Castle about working?
Yes,
on
he
the
already
property?
did. He messed with
That'll
me.
be a site plan issue too. Okay, thank you.
So the mechanics of this next step, you made a big unveiling here.
Yes.
I'm not sure we want to take a moment to discuss how we feel about it. I'm suggesting not, but.
Well, we do have Mr. Hernandez, if you want to ask any questions about how they feel about it, that's one of the reasons why he volunteered to be down
I
here.
mean, I think the other challenge too is we're missing a good chunk of our board tonight.
Yes.
So
Right.
it's, you know, almost half the board isn't here. and
They're
it's-
gonna have to watch this to sort of get.
Yeah, so, my condolences. But I think
Michael, I
we're
think it was
missing
captivating.
I'll send him a note and say, watch till the end because JV comes up.
Yeah, so, I mean, we've been in discussion, like Paul says, we've been in discussion with this. We've been looking to relocate the building, and, you know, this location came about to have a zoning compliant location. We're 20 feet away from the street, 15 away from the property line, and there's more than 30 feet between the adjacent buildings. We're still, you know, in the process of working on the site plan, we're both working on it, to try to make sure that it works for both parties. But we do agree that this is a much better location, and it's, you know, much easier to handle grade changes and all of that, as one project.
So the takeaway is your client is embracing this idea.
Yes.
JB, just keep in mind, I'm sure you've thought of it already, but as that develops and the board is gonna wanna see the site plan.
Right, we do
That
have it.
building, because it's new, or will be new, and it'll be in the floodplain, it's gonna have to be elevated.
Yes.
So you're gonna have some differential between that
We-
new building and
we
the
are-
existing, and, you know, we're gonna need to see how all that ties
Part
together.
of the discussions we're having is to raise in some way, to take the moment to, you know, make that one of the benefits is to bring that out of the floodplain. And I know eventually when we come back with our site plan, there was a site plan also approved in 2004 for this property, so I guess it'd be an amendment to that site plan.
agenda, have a way of.
Fighting on it?
Well said, JB.
Want to go around the table? Questions, comments? Michael?
So the standard is now, what, 10 feet elevation for the 100-year storm?
Yeah, the advisory base flood elevation is 10. It hasn't been adopted yet, but it's set at 10.
Mike, which means you gotta get to 8 because the emergency vehicles say that you can have up to 2 feet.
I was reading the memo,
Yeah.
just want to make sure that that's, so we're not designing the 10, we're designing the 8, so we're going to anticipate that there was
The village fire
a worst-case
department,
storm.
right, we met with them, and they said they're comfortable with 2 feet, having to traverse through 2 feet of water to get to this site. So that's what we're using 8 feet as a minimum elevation for the road. Obviously, any structures need to be at the 10.
So even though that's what I believe that Joe was going to, even though this is 8 or 6 here, the building's gonna have to be at 10.
Right. So the logistics of making all those grades work,
Yeah.
you know, you're gonna have the existing building, I think, where do they fall, around 5 or so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you're gonna have a new building at 10 or 11, and then a road in between at 8, so making all that work, you know, that'll get worked out.
Barbara, any questions?
No,
Okay,
at the moment.
We'll be back.
all righty, thank you very much.
All right.
Well, we'll get any specific deliverables for the next meeting, I'm assuming we'll coordinate with Mr. Chimelli, and I'll be speaking to Mr. Stout.
I think that on, that, you know, this color drawing in the program is gonna be, even though there's a new idea, I think that kind of diagram really helps. I mean, that kind of delineation.
Chuck, as I said, any further deliverables, we'll speak to either Mr. Chimelli or Mr. Stout on the legal and engineering side?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, obviously, you need to submit plans.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
Address
Yeah, I know.
all the changes you talked about tonight. That's it.
I have them in the trunk. Thank you. Appreciate your patience.
Thank you, sir.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Just sign where it says sign here. I feel like I'm buying a car at a high interest loan.
Legal people here, so they can see it.
So Jim.
Yeah.
Is it off?
This one's off.